I'm always drawn to how the front pages divide, as you know. I fully appreciate that not everybody follows these things very closely. But the more popular or populist the paper, the more likely it is this morning to be featuring coverage of the missing submarine that was on that little mission to visit the Titanic. And sadly, we have to put the Times on the list of populist or popular papers these days, while the arguably more serious prints are looking at the what we could have to call the mortgage time bomb, which pretty much narrows it down to the Guardian and the newspaper these days. It is the mortgage time bomb to which we will turn our attention today, and I do so with quite a heavy heart, to be honest with you. I know things are going to get really, really bad, and that they are already getting really, really bad. And bizarrely, it's an issue that breaks one of our golden rules. You know, the plural of anecdote is not data. But it is sometimes. It's sort of, it is a collection of anecdotes that have allowed us to see just how bad things are getting and how bad they're going to get. And the base rate is expected to increase by another 0.5% or percentage points tomorrow. This is in the latest attempt to tame UK inflation. And we find ourselves in a weird situation, don't we? Because you have to have some trust in central bankers, and yet central bankers are fallible. And for me, as a relatively amateurish observer of these matters, I'm increasingly persuaded that the Bank of England have got it wrong on this. I think having to appoint a governor of the Bank of England who wasn't going to tell the truth about Brexit may be a crucial part of his absence of qualifications, but it does seem to me that this desperate attempt to reduce the amount of money that we have to spend by increasing interest rates in the hope that we will spend less and somehow prices will come down, it's just not working. It really isn't. I'm also conscious of the fact that very few of us have even the beginning of an understanding of what's going on, but those are sometimes the mornings that we can find most illuminating together. Here's the thing, though, right? And I thought the more I swatted up on stuff and the more I tried to get my head around things, I thought I'd move further away from this relatively simplistic worldview, this relatively simplistic analysis. But I look at COVID, oddly. I look at the lockdown, the beginnings of the inquiry. I look at the economic situation. I look at some other elements of what is going on in our world, and I'm increasingly persuaded that the key to understanding almost everything is the school of we should be allowed to do whatever we want. We should be allowed to do whatever we want. I'm researching newspapers at the moment and just looking at what's happened to the country over the last 30 years, and I'd never quite joined the dots before, because I used to think to myself, well, these secretly funded think tanks, they don't shill for newspapers. They don't, they probably come in against regulation, but they're too busy shilling for fossil fuels or shilling for tobacco or shilling for processed food and sugar company. Do you see what I mean? Your Tufton Street lot who are always insisting that government has got no business trying to look after the population. What they're really doing is lobbying for profits to be untrammelled. I don't know whether this is going to count as a penny drop moment or a what the hell is he talking about section of the programme. So you can see that, right? Uncontrolled, unfettered capitalism. The reason why people like Jacob Rees-Mogg bang on all the time about red tape is that they honestly think that businesses, investment funds or manufacturers or suppliers, whatever it should be, anybody in the business of making money should not have any restrictions placed upon them whatsoever by government. And of course, that's what newspaper owners want as well. They don't want any form of regulation. They don't want any form of red tape, checks or balances, scrutiny, accountability. So that's where they meet. In this idea that we shouldn't have to obey it. We should be able to do whatever the hell we want. And that seems to me to be part of the reason why. I think it goes for Brexit as well. I think sometimes ideologically rather than economically, they just hated the idea of having any limits, if you like, on what they could do. They think rules are great for the rest of us, for the plebs. It's rules all day long. And if you think I'm exaggerating, look at how they treated Owen Paterson and Boris Johnson. The same people, the same ghouls. Just the rules shouldn't apply to us. But of course, what that leads to is supermarkets and suppliers now, I think, profiteering in an incredible way. And in a way that is impacting immediately upon inflation. And in an attempt to, I think, a failed or let's just say a potentially flawed attempt to bring inflation down, they keep putting interest rates up, which means the richest people are going to get richer and the rest of us are not. That's it. I mean, it's a work in progress. I'm trying to knit all the stuff together in my head at the moment, never mind on the page. But I do think that the importance of understanding that we should be able to do whatever we want school of thought, whether you're looking at individual politicians, whether you're looking at economic policies, or whether you're looking at media ownership, that we should be able to do whatever we want. Get your head around that, and a lot of the bad stuff makes sense. So right now, for example, government paying a fortune in interest to the banks. Rather splendid academic Richard Murphy suggests that they could simply claw some of it back. So they're paying 40 billion in interest to the banks. Because of the level in interest rates on their own debt, they could just claw 30 billion of it back. But you know that the newspapers would call that communism because they're on the side of the people who want to be able to do whatever they want. In this case, banks, and in their case, newspapers. Is this making sense? Is this landing? You can tell I've got a book on the go because my brain is going off in all sorts of weird directions at 10 o'clock every morning. And then you come to the supermarkets and the water companies. They should be able to do whatever the hell they want. And they lobby politics and they own politicians and they own media. And that works towards a place where they can do whatever they want. How the hell have we ended up with so much poo in our water? Answer, the water companies can do whatever they want. And not only can they do whatever they want, but they make enormous profits while they're doing it. It's absolutely insane that the standard of the service they provide is abysmal and appalling, and the size of the dividends that they accrue is stratospheric. But you see it everywhere. And supermarkets now are making a ton of money. Do you think they're going to reduce their prices if their costs come down? If they've established the fact that you're prepared to pay through the nose for a packet of butter and a pint of milk or an iceberg lettuce, do you think that they're then, when their prices, if their prices come down, do you honestly think that they're going to turn around and give you some money back or say, well, of course they're not. They'll charge whatever they can get away with. Why? Answer, because they should be able to do whatever they want. That's what they mean when they talk about red tape and regulation. It's everywhere. I'm going to play you a little clip from a documentary made in the American Embassy in, I think, was it 2018? Yes, in 2018. I don't know whether you caught it at the time, but this is US Embassy officials having a conversation that, to the eternal shame of almost every journalist in this country, nobody else except us had at the time.
Growth is starting to slow down, but what we're probably going to see is a longer-term, slower slide of lower economic growth. Inflation went up from 0.5% to 3%, so it's quite a significant increase. And that's not inflation from a growing, bubbly economy. That's inflation from an outside shock. Okay. So that's the worst kind of inflation. That's going to be a problem. This is coming at the end of a long period of austerity. People are very, very tired of it. They're very frustrated by it. And some of those longer-term economic issues are some of the things that fuel Brexit. Yeah. So if Brexit ends up not helping them or not obviously helping people economically, that could have political knock-on effects.
Well, they're wrong about one thing. It's not really going to have political knock-on effects because both major parties are still papering over the cracks. But the idea that American embassy officials could see in 2018 the direction of traffic, the direction in which our economy was inexorably headed, is, as I say, a source of national shame. It is, as Julie puts it, eerily prophetic or blatantly obvious. Both, I would argue. That's just a little bit of background for you because I need to sometimes get this stuff off my chest in order to get my own thoughts in order. We're not really talking about that, but it is the bedrock, if you like, of the conversation that we are going to have. Here is the current Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, addressing the issue of help for mortgagees.
Well, today's figures strengthen the case for the government to stick to its guns. No matter what the pressure from left, right or centre, we won't be pushed off course. Because if we're going to help families, if we're going to relieve the pressure on people with mortgages, on businesses, we need to squeeze every last drop of high inflation out of the economy. And if you look at what's happening in other countries, you can see that rises in interest rates do bring down inflation over time. That will happen here, but we need to be patient, we need to stick to the course, and then we'll get to the other side. We know there is enormous pressure for families with mortgages, and it's a really big deal for family finances. But the one thing that would not help those families is to step in with short-term support that meant that inflation stayed higher for longer and those mortgage rates stayed higher for longer. So I'm meeting the mortgage lenders later this week to ask what else can be done to relieve pressure in very difficult times, but we won't do anything that means that high inflation stays around for longer, because that is the root cause of the pressure they're facing.
So there it is. I think there's a massive problem here. And I know that you're going to laugh when I tell you what I think. The point you already can guess. What it begins with B, ends in Brexit. But I think when other countries raise interest rates and inflation comes down, they're different from us at the moment because we have imposed economic sanctions on ourselves. If you want to bring down the price of stuff, then surely the free movement of goods and the free movement of labour would be absolutely crucial tools with which to help achieve that. It literally brings down the costs of getting stuff into people's pockets, getting stuff into people's fridges, getting stuff into people's homes. It literally brings down the cost measurably and visibly. We have elected as a population to make that harder, to make the journey of produce from field to customer harder and more expensive. And of course, we have made it harder to harvest things by creating labour shortages. I genuinely think there's a massive problem here. When I said to you, as I've said pretty much every day for the last 7 years, if you don't beard the liars, then things will get worse, right? If you don't call out the liars, Boris Johnson being the best example. I said to you, I gave a flipping speech at the BBC 6 years ago about if you don't start calling him a liar, then everything is going to get worse. And hey-ho, here we are. But because Brexit's still this sort of shibboleth, I may have misused that word slightly. I should have looked it up first. Because Brexit is just this shibboleth. We're treating our economy as if we hadn't just imposed economic sanctions on ourselves. I told you I was in a funny mood, didn't I? So what question are we going to ask? I think I want to know whether you think the government... What could the government do? 0345 6060 973. What could the government do? And I'm going to try to be a bit nicer than I am sometimes on this one, because I don't know that it is fair to dismiss things that initially sound a bit pie in the sky. My contention is they haven't got a clue what they're doing. And they are possibly getting everything wrong because they are not being honest about the thing they still boast about achieving, which has been by every measure economically disastrous, and which officials at the American embassy were literally plotting and predicting five whole years ago. But on mortgages, they can do something. They are currently electing not to. What do you think? What can they do? And I haven't got the right line yet on because what I want to know is how close we are to repossessions, how close we are to seeing a significant number of people unable to meet their mortgage payments at the end of the month, right? So I'll just ask that. How close are we? How close are you to not being able to do it? To actually not being able to do it? Because you're getting the new figures through. They're stunning. I get sent them every day, whether we're doing this topic or not. You just send them to me. James, we've just reapplied for our mortgage, and I've got to find an extra £1,200 a month. £1,200 a month after tax. I mean, come on. So how close are we, do you think, to keys through the Building Society letterbox? And when that starts happening, the politics gets hideous. And of course they can't, this is the really bad bit, the really mad bit. They can't fully explain why we're in such a mess, because that would involve admitting that the project that got them all into Downing Street, Johnson, Truss, Sunak, was an absolute disaster. That's just my theory, and I know it would be, wouldn't it? 20 minutes after 10 is the time. I can't every day, how bad is it, are your pips squeaking? But the mortgage stuff is getting seriously scary. And the idea that the government should do something, I think coming off the back of things like furlough and help with energy bills, it is conceivable that a Conservative government could and might. I wouldn't have thought that 5 years ago. But what can they do? What should they do? What could they do? And how are you? 0345 6060 9. Actually, Josh is in Hendon. Josh, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
What I'd like to say is that inflation, being the expansion of the monetary supply, causes price rises simply because it decreases the value of the currency in our pockets. It's basically a secret tax that the government, using the Bank of England, have been putting on us for years. And they do this with quantitative easing. The only way that we can reduce inflation, and by doing so reduce the price rises, and by doing so reduce mortgage rates and other things like that, and make our lives easier, is by quantitative tightening and taking currency out of the system. The more currency there is in the system, the less valuable it is. It's basic supply and demand.
Right. How does that work in practice?
Well, in practice, the Bank of England, they don't actually start printing anymore. What they do is, with quantitative easing, where the government buys its own debt from the bank. If instead they reverse it by selling the debt, for example, or simply by taking currency out of the system by destroying it.
Selling the debt to whom?
Selling the debt back to who they bought it from.
I don't understand what that means. Forgive me.
So what they do is, and they when they buy the debt, they buy it from.
You mean when you
bank.
say that when they buy the debt, you mean when they borrow money?
Well, we're not talking about the borrowing. That's a whole other issue.
Right. How do you buy a debt?
Well, what they do is they issue the bonds, but they issue the bonds to the Bank of England.
Yes.
And then then the Bank of England, they move it on basically to the other banks.
Right.
This is the way this is why when more currency gets put into the economy.
No, but hang on. I'm just trying to
gets to the bank.
Trying to pin down what you mean by buy it back. What are they going to buy it back with?
What I mean basically is that if they simply take out currency that is currently in the system, and they can do that. It's something that the Bank of England has done before. They call it quantitative tightening. It's quite a complicated process.
Well, I don't think either of us understand it, do we? How do you buy back the debt? What do you buy it back with?
No, they've bought it back. They bought their own debt.
Yes, but you said they should buy it back.
No, they should sell it.
So who to?
Sell it back to the Bank of England.
Right. Yeah, you could be a genius, Josh. I'm afraid I lack the mental capacity to judge whether or not that is feasible. Also, the Bank of England's independent, isn't it? I think so. In terms of what the government can do and what the Bank of England can do, we're possibly trying to ride two horses at the same time. Neil's in Coulsdon. Neil, what would you like to say? Let's drag it back to the real world, shall we, Neil?
Hi, James. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Why? Why has this one prompted you to break your purdah? Just if you don't mind me asking.
Because you're an intelligent chap, and when
I'm an intelligent chap every day. Why is it that this? Why is it that this subject?
Because this has rankled me.
Right.
We have so basically, I'm an incidental landlord. We had a property in Tooting, southwest London, popular area. Rented it out 2 years ago. Crazy amount of rent coming in. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I know you were a landlord for a little while.
Indeed, I was. I was both accidental and incompetent, but on we go.
And we have chickens as well.
We're
James.
practically related, Neil. It's magical.
And so we bought property in Coulsdon, really great fixed rate 2 years ago, just under 3%. The letters come through from NatWest and other banks are probably appropriate as well. So the mortgage currently is at £2,500, and come November they want £4,700.
What's that going to do, mate?
I've got to go back to work. I'm an ex-estate agent who's retired due to health reasons.
Okay.
We have two incomes coming in at the moment, which covers bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But it's crazy, man. And also on the letting one, although it pays itself. Section 24 came in, which means landlords can't do certain things for tax.
Right.
So we're basically losing money on that flat. And, we're looking at each other going, who on earth can afford £4,700 on a mortgage?
Yeah. I guess it's relative to the size of the mortgage that you already had. So yours is going up by close to 100%. And if you had a much smaller mortgage, if you still be going up by close to 100%, but it would be a smaller figure, and you'd be able to pay it. So there's an element of, well, there isn't though, is there? I'm trying to articulate the idea that you made a choice to have a certain standard of living, to have a certain size or value of house, and then you're going to. But we all do that. Every single person has done that, and the system is supposed to somehow prevent us from purchasing properties that we're likely to be unable to afford in the near future. I just need to qualify with no offence to Josh. I've never seen a number of texts come in accusing someone of talking absolute rubbish, a Tufton Street hack. This guy's talking garbage. They purchased previously issued government debt from pension funds. This guy's talking complete bilge. These are inappropriate tools for the current problem. What a headbanger. Get him off. Does this guy work for Tufton Street? So I'm just reading all that out in balance and as a justification for steering things back towards the personal experience. And as you speak, Neil, Chris tweets me to say, I'm meeting my mortgage advisor at 11. We will decide whether or not we can keep our family home. It's up in August. We just don't know what to do. Both the wife and I work every hour we can, and this is going to tip us over. There's a lot of it about, Neil.
But James, I've been an estate agent for 30 years.
Yes. So it's all your fault.
I saw, my first property I bought in 1987. Interest rates went from 9% to 15%.
Yes.
And then I think there were 2 crazy days when they went up to 19% on Black Monday or whatever. So I kind of know my onions.
Yes.
And I haven't seen this coming.
No. So I understand your point. So if you can't see it coming, what chance is there for people who've had nothing to do with the property market except their own stake in it?
And we're lucky enough. I can go and get a job back in agency.
Right.
Health reasons, I kind of retired. We've got 2 incomes coming in.
Yes, you said.
So we're lucky.
So you'll be okay as well. I mean, it's going to be very heavily commission based, and I can't see the property market going great guns anytime soon. But the rental market will keep moving, and you will be all right. But the prospect of that 1980s spectre returning when keys were being put, I mean, you'll remember it. You putting keys through the Building Society letterbox. It must be getting pretty close now.
I worked for one of the building societies who had a chain of estate agencies, and we would get hundreds. Back in 1986, 87, I had 300 or 400 repossession properties which were vacant, and I was like a property manager. My day would literally be just making sure no one had broken in, no one had, the water been drained, etc. We had more properties than we had buyers, and when you had a buyer, you'd do backflips. And I don't think we're going to go there now, but if this is not sorted or we can't get decent sort of fixed rates.
Right. Well, I don't think that's. That's the thing. That might be a long-term fix, but what can they do now? What can they do between now and Christmas, Neil? Your thoughts on the government are the same as mine. Yeah.
It's like,
well, given the benefit of the doubt, if they come up with something here, is there anything they can do between now and Christmas?
No, because
but there must
Bank
be.
of England, the Bank of England are governing interest rates.
Of course.
So the government cleverly, I think, was it Gordon Brown who then chucked it out from the government to the Bank of England. The Bank of England are independent, so that you can't.
They can't influence interest rates. They're trying to.
No. And I was watching TV this morning, James.
I'm late for the news. In a sentence,
inflation's gone up.
Or stayed the same. Core inflation's gone up, and it was supposed to be coming down now. Do you ever get the? You think, wouldn't you? You put a massively successful investment banker in Downing Street. I remember a lot of callers sharing my naivety, thinking, well, he must be good with money. No, that's it. That's your final comment. That wry chuckle. He must be good with money. Maybe he is, as long as it's all his. You know the old sort of T-shirt slogans about if voting made any difference, they wouldn't let you do it, and that kind of thing. There are days, aren't there, where you wonder what's going on and why the government appears utterly powerless to exert any sort of influence over relatively catastrophic circumstances. Trying, with a modicum of success this morning, to sort of straddle the micro and the macro, the personal and the political, I suppose, as in affecting everybody. But I guess if you're in that situation, like some of my correspondents already this morning, where you are now staring down the barrel of losing your home, and it's come around so quickly. Our last caller, Neil, not a property professional of 30 years experience, completely blindsided by what's happened. And it would seem to me that the traditional model of trying to bring down inflation by putting up interest rates is unlikely to work like it works in economies that haven't deliberately imposed economic sanctions on themselves, that haven't deliberately and consciously increased the costs of labour and production and importing. That just seems to me to be a huge elephant in the room that no one in government can mention because it's a consequence of Brexit. But I could easily be wrong about that. 10:35 is the time. Mark's in Wellingborough. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Great to speak to you. Long-time listener and first-time caller and whatnot.
All of that.
So, really, I want to speak to you about what the government can do. I mean, obviously, going through sort of situations, myself and friends and things like that with the cost of living crisis.
Yes.
But I follow Marina Purkis on Twitter quite a lot.
Yes.
And
I like Marina. She's of this parish as well, doing some work here as well.
Yes, she is. And she, June 19th, she popped a tweet up about, the fact that the government could impose a windfall tax on profits. I think, the top 6 banks in the country made an average of £6.26 billion profit in 2022.
I normally you balk at the idea of if something sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. I think Marina probably follows the lead of Richard Murphy, the professor of accounting practice at Sheffield University, who's done some fairly detailed analysis in this field. I mean, again, with that, almost like a visceral scepticism of something that sounds too good to be true. What would they do? Do the windfall tax and then just divvy up the cash between all mortgage holders?
Well, yeah, use it as,
about renters?
Use it as the emergency. Renters and second landlords are, obviously, renters are a different question because what they need to do is they need to put in, I mean, for me personally,
I would struggle sitting here today to accept a cheque from the government for help with my mortgage while rents are going up and renters aren't getting any help at all.
I would agree, and I think that what needs to come in, the biggest crisis is obviously within mortgage rates, but I think for me there also needs to be a discussion around rent control.
Maybe.
And, stopping the greed. And, making that, if property is someone's business, or if someone is a landlord, for example, and they're getting the help with their mortgages on
that's just almost ethically unsustainable, never mind economically.
In theory, though, it needs to be done with a caveat or a process in place where they... they have to pass that on.
Of course, but I mean, you're creating a mountain of regulation now, aren't you? A mountain of sort of bureaucracy rather than regulation. And the other thing is...
the government's job.
Why? Yeah, but why the hell would I have been making enormous donations to these people for the last 20 years if they're going to turn around and hit me with a windfall tax?
Well, that's the thing. And the problem is the windfall tax that the government would have to implement on the banks would be quite different to the one they've attempted to implement on the energy companies, because the energy companies can get out of paying the windfall tax, as we've seen, by decommissioning oil platforms and investing in green energy, whereas banks would have no way to wriggle out of it.
It's money, it's there, and we're having it.
Yeah, so I think that's probably why there's less of an appetite from a government point of view.
Maybe. I mean, maybe, who knows? Because they're not going to sit down and explain it to us properly. But who knows whether the diminished appetite is due to detail or ideology or fear of upsetting people, powerful people that they want to keep happy. I just, I would like someone to explain it to me. Someone in government to talk me through what their options are and why they're not following them. 10:38 is the time. And also to address that question of why, in a country that has made everything harder, deliberately made everything harder, they still think that raising interest rates will bring down inflation. I'll read you what Richard Murphy's had to say this morning, because I'm quite a fan of his. We should get him on the show, shouldn't we? But he pops up everywhere, quite rightly. We face a cost of living crisis created by events outside the UK, triggering rates of inflation that many in this country have never witnessed before. In the face of these rising prices, the Bank of England has increased the price of money itself. And he goes on to explain why that is so bizarre. It said Bank of England is wholly owned and controlled by the UK government. Questions the notion of whether it's independent or not, looks at the Bank of England Act in 1998, but then looks essentially at the almost mythological status of inflation bringing down, interest rate rises bringing down inflation, and I think very persuasively pointing out that it is a far from infallible theory. Michael's in Wokingham. Michael, what would you like to say?
Good morning to you, James. Lovely show as always.
It's all right. It's not the best today because there's nothing to zone in on, is there?
You as well.
You what?
Well, you used to phone up. You used to have people phoning up about parking. I think this is slightly more interesting.
Not on this show, mate. But I take your point. Carry on.
Right. We actually spoke a long time ago about Brexit and all that board. But let's move on to this point.
Yes.
I live in leafy Wokingham, very nice part of the world. And I'm very fortunate to live here. My mortgage was fixed 5 years ago, and I was one of those very unlucky ones to come out of it just as Miss Truss got into power. My mortgage has gone from 1.09 to 5.54, costing me over £950 a month extra.
Yeah.
The issue with that was, whilst I could just about swallow that, I've used the savings that I had put aside to help my daughter with her first house into our mortgage. So not only does it now affect mine and my wife's life, it's actually put a big bump in the road for my daughter. And while she's coming up 18 now, and I'd saved to help her like my parents helped me. I can't do that now, and I feel terrible.
Well, you mustn't, because it's entirely beyond your control. But it's almost like the social contract is under threat, isn't it? You know, just the relationship between doing your best and what you get in return for that is in jeopardy if it isn't already broken.
You know, it feels so unfair because ultimately my wife and I, we're not, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds. We do okay. But even now we have thought, okay, what do we do? And we've only been able to stay in the house that we worked blooming hard to get purely on the back of something else. And that feels pretty awful to me. I don't know. I'm not clever. I'm no cleverer, or certainly a lot stupider than a lot of the callers to this show. I don't have an idea. I mean, the idea of, you know, our government, if that's what you want to call them these days, helping me with my mortgage would stick in the craw a little bit, because, you know, what do they then do with people who are renting? My daughter's now going to be one of those renters, and that hamstrings her as well.
And of course it does.
It seems to me that the pillars of decency and leadership and the social construct of this country is a real peril, and it comes from that imbecile Johnson right the way down through Truss and her cronies.
Yeah, well, actually, you're talking there possibly shortly after anointing yourself as stupid. I think you've just said something very clever that I missed earlier when we were listening. I don't know if you were listening at the very top of the show when we listened back to some conversations that were being had in the American embassy in 2018 about the possible political impact of the direction of economic traffic. And they talked about political peril, and that's kind of what you're just sort of floating the notion of some form of public protest, aren't you, really? Or some form of fracture, because it looks as if that social contract is being broken at the moment. And what are you supposed to do if you're on the wrong end of that? What are you supposed to do? So we're asking what the government can do, but what can you do? Nothing.
The silent majority can.
I hate that phrase, but on this, on this occasion, I'm afraid it fits, doesn't it?
It does, because we're all, you know, I'm sitting here, and I'm watching people wander by, and none of us know what's going on behind closed doors. And I go past these nice houses with gates, and I go through a park, and you look at it and you think they must be struggling as well, unless they are so super rich, like the idiots, you know, Moggins and his cronies, that it doesn't really matter how bad it gets, because they'll always have the trust funds, always have the pensions,
it's capital.
Always have the investments to fall back on.
It's capital, isn't it? So however much you're earning, and a lot of the people in the houses you describe will be, as you say, earning a lot of money, but they will also be spending a lot of money, a lot more than they are used to spending. It's capital, wealth, asset. That's the trick. If you've got, a significant chunk of change in the bank, you're laughing, I think, at the moment. You're making more money out of that money than ever before. And the cost of living crisis isn't going to touch you. You can absorb its consequences. There's a question from Michael. What can we do? What can we do? So Murphy identifies 3 reasons for inflation, which are unique in a way, or at least specific to the United Kingdom, because a lot of the Ukraine-related inflation has gone back down to pre-war levels. Wholesale food, shipping prices, gas, petrol prices down drastically from their peak, not quite to pre-war rises, but the shipping and wholesale food costs are. So inflation hasn't come down. There must be other reasons for that, and he's identified 3. The first, pat on the back, is Brexit. Continuing supply chain disruptions and considerable extra costs fueling continued inflation. I don't see how that can be. Well, Richard Murphy says that fact cannot be avoided. It's just so blindingly obvious that if you make it more expensive to produce, import and supply stuff, inflation will respond. That's literally what it is. Second, profiteering. It's touched on this at the beginning. Banks, oil companies, many companies in food supply chains very clearly increasing their absolute levels of profit and their profit rates. Not every company, but enough. So what's that? That's that we should be allowed to do whatever we want. How dare you come along? Now here's a guest from the Institute of Wizard Wheezers to tell us why it would be absolutely ridiculous for any form of limit to be placed on the profits being made by this country. And then the third reason is the cost of money, which is the interest rate rises, which they are clearly intent on continuing with. Richard Murphy calls it inflationary in itself. It's all very confusing, but I do feel some mornings we just need to talk about it, not in search of solutions. Don't laugh at me, because I can be a bit soppy sometimes. But sometimes a problem shared is a problem halved. Sometimes company is comfort in itself. Sometimes, as our last caller, I think, beautifully alluded to, recognising that behind most front doors and behind most gates, there are going to be conversations like this unfolding. And the absence of a neat solution or a neat answer might add to senses of stress and anxiety, but it's better out than in. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we take something of a departure from the previous conversation, because I'm joined in the studio by 2 people with a deeply troubling tale to tell. Bill Browder, you will be familiar with, a human rights activist who has dedicated himself really to exposing Vladimir Putin's kleptocracy and calling for sanctions long before the invasion of Ukraine on precisely the sort of kleptocrats who have been somewhat belatedly deprived of some of the privilege they've been free to buy in the West for decades. And by Evgenia Kara-Murza, who is the wife of Vladimir, a journalist and human rights activist about whom I have spoken to you on several occasions. Let's begin briefly with Bill, if I may. And I know Evgenia is in this country to draw attention to the fact that A, Vladimir is a British citizen, and B, he is being fairly profoundly let down by the British government at the moment. He currently resides in a Russian jail. He was arrested in April 2022, sentenced to 25 years in April 2023 for trumped-up political charges. Can you give a quick thumbnail sketch of his story, Bill?
Yeah, so in 2009, my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, was murdered in a Russian prison for uncovering Russian corruption. I embarked on a mission to get justice for Sergei, which one of the main things was something called the Magnitsky Act, which freezes the assets and bans the visas of Russian kleptocrats and human rights violators. One of the people who joined me in this campaign was Vladimir Kara-Murza. He was a Russian opposition activist and a British citizen. And he joined me in parliaments around the world, in the U.S. Congress, in the European Parliament, et cetera, making the case that from a Russian perspective, Putin was killing people, stealing money, and he and his cronies shouldn't be allowed to spend that money in the West. And he was a very powerful advocate. And in retaliation for his advocacy, which worked, by the way, we have 35 Magnitsky Acts around the world, they tried to kill him. They tried to kill him with poison in 2015. They tried to kill him with poison in 2017 in Moscow. He nearly died both times, multiple organ failure, coma, all sorts of real nastiness. Each time it took him a year to recover. And when the war started, he went back to Russia. He protested the war. He went on television calling Putin a murderer and a war criminal. and he was subsequently arrested and handed down a 25-year prison sentence for treason. And this is the longest sentence of any political prisoner in Russia, and it's a result of his work on the Magnitsky Act and is a result of his standing up to Putin on this war. And he's a close friend of mine. Yevgenia, his wife who's here, is also a close friend of mine. And I have made it my top priority in my life to try to free him from prison and try to keep him alive.
Yevgenia, forgive the crassness of this question. Why did he go back to Russia knowing the risks?
Well, thank you very much for having us here.
Any time at all. I hope you know that.
And to answer your question, I think for Vladimir, the decision was not to go back so much as not to leave the country. So both times after both poisonings, when he went back to Russia, it was because I had taken him to the US for rehabilitation. And both times he returned to Russia and continued spending at least half of his time there because he's always identified himself as a Russian politician. And to him, he says that I would not have the moral right to call on Russians to protest from a safe distance. I need to share the risks and challenges faced by Russians back home, by those Russians who do protest. And we talk about thousands and thousands of people. Over the last year, over 20,000 people have been arbitrarily detained across the country for protesting against the war. The number of political prisoners in Russia today is hundreds. And all of these people show to the world, and they risk their freedom and very often their lives, to show to the world that the image that Vladimir Putin wants to create for the whole world of that unity of the Russian people behind him and the war has nothing to do with reality.
What contact do you have with him at the moment?
I haven't seen or talked to him since his arrest in April 2022.
When you married, did you know what you were signing up for?
Well, he was the same person.
I know.
We've been together.
I don't know if you know. I've met him a few times.
Yes, of course.
He's an incredible character.
He is. He truly is. And he amazes me as well. You know, I've been married to the guy for over 20 years. And every time I hear him speak, I'm like a little girl falling in love all over again because he's so convincing. And he's so honest, and he's so principled, and so decent in every way. So I truly am deeply proud of my husband, and he makes, it's amazing because people from all over the world have been writing to him in prison, and very often I hear people say that he somehow manages to inspire them and to give them hope from behind bars.
What could the British government do? What more could they do? I mean, I know anything would be a start, but plausibly and realistically, what are you hoping to secure in your 2 days here, your 2 days of intense advocacy?
Well, I'm very grateful for the UK for introducing those sanctions against a few perpetrators, a few persecutors of Vladimir. And I'm very grateful for the strong statement that the UK ambassador to Russia made after Vladimir's verdict was pronounced. But I am truly baffled by the fact that it was Canada, not the UK, where he's a citizen, that was the first country to introduce sanctions against his persecutors. And these sanctions were then followed by the US. And only then the UK jumped in and introduced sanctions of its own. I'm also baffled by the fact that it was, again, Canada leading the way in making these very strong public statements in Vladimir's case, because they recently awarded him an honorary citizenship there. And that is an amazingly strong message of solidarity with all those who, like Vladimir, protest against the war, because in Russia, these people are being portrayed as criminals, as spies and traitors. And Canada went and said, you know what? We would be honored to have such a citizen. And I would like to see the UK government do something as strong, because Vladimir is a UK citizen, and I believe that the UK government should get involved in more thorough and consistent advocacy on his behalf.
Bill, you're used to banging on doors of multiple international governments, and you're also being you're used to being told over the years that you're having a laugh if you think any of this stuff is going to happen, and then you keep chipping away, and it happens. Canada's always been a bit of a pioneer on the sanctions front. It was early champions of Magnitsky. You don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, because I don't want to make the situation worse. But why do you think, knowing what you know and having done what you've done, the British government is lagging behind other sovereign nations?
Because the British government's just bad at this stuff. I mean, look, I'm friends with Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe and her husband Richard, and he had to go on a hunger strike in front of the Foreign Office, in order to get them to act in her case. And it's just institutionally not set up to deal with these types of situations. And we were also, Evgeny and I were in Washington advocating for Vladimir, and they have the U.S. government has a special thing called the Office of Hostage Affairs. Yeah. Instead of just, delivering, magazines and warm socks to hostages, they've got a guy, he's a former Army Ranger, who's the special envoy for hostage affairs, and he looks at every possible tool the U.S. government has, negative pressure, positive pressure, diplomatic pressure, and it's his only mission to free hostages. And Britain's got nothing of the sort.
But that's a competence answer. That's an answer of competence, not an answer of ideology or reluctance. It's just they lack the tools as much as the will.
Well, I think that this country is in the 18th century when it comes to this stuff. And the number of hostages is just going up, skyrocketing, as all these dictators are grabbing people all over the world.
Who are you seeing while you're here, Evgenia? What sort of
we're seeing a number of parliamentarians and a number of politicians hoping, including from the FCDO. And I am positive. I want to remain an optimist. So I hope to hear something good from them on this trip to London. So we'll see.
The Foreign Affairs Committee have reported quite recently, haven't they, that we're just not in the game on this stuff. It's just our tactics aren't. We don't even have tactics enough to say that they're not working. And Iran, China, Russia, and others are using these kind of incarcerations as tools.
And we need to be stepping up and having a whole strategy for how to deal with this. We need to have people whose job it is to deal with this. And it's, the government fails in so many ways, but this is one of the other ways. And so if you've got a British passport and something bad happens to you abroad unjustly, you're pretty much out of luck. And if you were a passport holder of a different country, your fate would be a lot different. And we shouldn't have to feel that way.
Mountains are moved by other governments that aren't even approached by ours. And you mentioned Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. We had Jimmy Lai's son in recently. He's similarly sort of languishing with a sense of abandonment by the British government, I think. Is that the right word to use, Evgenia?
Absolutely. I believe that the approach of the British government has been to basically do nothing in order not to provoke any more hostage taking, but doing nothing and leaving these people behind. And basically, the basic human right is the right for life.
Yes.
And these people are basically left to rot in foreign prisons. Is that okay? I don't think so. So I think, yes, it is a lack of instruments to approach the problem. The problem of political prisoners and hostage taking all over the world is rising. And it will continue rising whether democratic governments are prepared for it or not, whether they're equipped to deal with it or not. And because all these autocrats work together, they learn from each other, they watch each other, they adopt each other's practices, I believe it would only be right for democratic governments to approach it also together. And to maybe, if democratic countries had such offices, they could work, they could cooperate on creating a set of instruments to, hopefully prevent such practices from happening, from being used in the first place.
So systemic and not just for the potential benefit of Vladimir, but
Absolutely.
for the potential benefit of anyone speaking truth to power anywhere in the world. Yevgenia Karamazov, Bill Browder, many thanks indeed for your time. Any time you need to use this microphone, it's here for you. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's Wednesday, so of course we will be covering PMQs a little later today. A lot of love coming in for Evgenia and her husband Vladimir. I will endeavour to pass that on. It is an incredible story, and there's something very strange about knowing people who are caught up in major events. I felt similarly when Richard Ratcliffe, who Bill of course referred to, was on hunger strike outside the Foreign Office in in the hope of helping his wife Nazanin. When you know these people, and I've known Vladimir for years, the idea of him languishing in a Russian prison cell while Vladimir Putin uses him to send oppressive messages to potential critics elsewhere in Russia and the world, it's almost impossible to process. We turn our attention next to completely different territory. I don't know how closely you've been following this processed food conversation, but we're going to have it here. A quite bizarre business, really, because I heard the chap who's written a book about processed food. I'm going to forget his name now. He's a twin, and I think it's von Tolkien or something like that. He's very impressive, brilliant communicator. We should have got him on the show, actually, or certainly maybe on Full Disclosure. But you know when you've got the radio on in the background and you think you might have misheard something? I don't imagine it happens when I'm on, does it? It doesn't happen when I'm on. You've never got me on in the background. This is front and centre. This is absolutely top priority stuff. But I had the radio on the other day, and I heard him come on talking about processed food and the health damages, the damage it can do to our health. And I wasn't fully concentrating. So I thought he said in the background that British kids are shorter than their counterparts in other countries because the quality of our diet, our nutrition is so poor. It's not that people are going without food. It's not that people are hungry. Keith's not. He's actually eating a banana as I introduce this topic, would you believe? So mate, put it away, please. Seriously, that's very distracting. So the problems that processed food causes are fairly well documented now. Do you know this ties in with the first hour as well? They should be able to do whatever they want. We shouldn't have to abide by any rules at all. So the people who are selling processed food full of salt and emulsifiers and all the rest of it, absolutely untrammeled. Oh, you can't have red tape. Children aren't. It's incredible, really, when you finally get that Rosetta Stone to understand so much of what's gone wrong in this country, being based upon the fact of letting people with money and power do whatever they want, rather than letting them keep all the money and power, but just trying to limit the amount of damage and harm they can do to everybody else, whether you're talking about water companies or food suppliers or the rest of it, or energy companies or banks. But I heard him say British kids are shorter than other children, and I thought they can't be short. Don't be ridiculous. I've never heard that before. I've been doing this job now for the best part of 20 years. If our children were measurably shorter than children in other comparable countries because of the poor quality of our diet, there is no earthly way I would have missed that. There's no way I wouldn't know that. I must have misheard. Well, I don't know what he said, but he didn't say shorter. Maybe he said curter. Our children are curter. They're getting ruder. What is it? They can't be short. And then I opened up the newspaper today and I read that Britain has fallen down the international rankings in child height. Now, two things here. I didn't know there were international rankings in child height. And it turns out it's true. We are falling. We're getting shorter as a consequence of our poor national diet. And I had no idea. A, that this was a thing. And B, that our national diet was that poor. And I like to think of myself as quite up on this topic. You know, we have Jamie is one of the people, like Bill and Yevgenia, who has a constant open invitation into this studio whenever he wants to. Jamie Oliver can come in because I think that the work that he does is so absolutely important. So I'm certainly not what I would call behind the curve on this kind of things. Progress has been made. School dinners have been improved. The sugar tax is a slightly more nuanced conversation because although the amounts of sugar in drinks have come down, the amount of artificial sweeteners with which the sugar has been replaced may well be presenting a different set of problems. But I didn't think things were that bad. We've fallen since 1985. We've fallen 30 places. 30 places. We were 69th out of 200 nationalities for average height at the age of 5. Who do you think the tallest kids in the world are? I'm doing a bit of a tease on this one. Who do you think who do you think that? Don't say it too loud in my ear, otherwise they might get picked up by the microphone and it will spoil all our fun. Who do you think the tallest kids in the world are? The tallest children in the world? It's the Dutch. Would you believe it? The Dutch. The average 5-year-old boy in the UK is 112.5 centimetres tall, versus 119.6 centimetres in the Netherlands. The comparable country with the tallest children, and by comparable it means, economically and geographically similar. The average girl is 111.7 centimetres tall here, 7 centimetres taller, 118.4 in the Netherlands. And this comes from national measurement programmes collated by the Non-Communicable Diseases Risk Factor Collaboration. I've got all their albums. It's a global network of health scientists. So 1985, we were 69th out of 200 nationalities, and we're now 96th for girls and 102nd for boys. Just have a think about that. That's absolutely bonkers. Or bananas, if you prefer. Isn't it? I never know. I bore you rigid, don't I, every day with little contemplations upon my own ability to work out which stories are important and which stories are not. I mean, for example, the children who died in the hold of a boat that it looks like was possibly turned away by Greek coast guards, getting considerably less media attention than the 5 people currently stuck on a submarine in the vicinity of the Titanic, or the 120 children that have gone missing. Refugee children that have gone missing in this country, about whom Suella Braverman seems to care not one jot. So I never have. No one has the objective algorithm for what is of interest to the public, multiplied by what is of genuine public interest. But this just seems to me to be a truly remarkable story. Tim Cole is the expert in child growth rates at Great Ormond Street, and he's absolutely stunned. He says it's startling, this 30-place fall. It's quite clear we're falling behind relative to Europe. And at age 5, we're further behind than we are at age 19, which means things are getting worse in this country as opposed to better. So, listen, I have now a big enough audience to allow me to do things a little bit differently from how I used to. And one of the big differences that we've made over the last few years, yes, quite a few people pointing out that we're short and we're increasingly short and increasingly obese, which is not a good combination, is it? There's nothing wrong with being short. I don't think for a minute that I'm being heightist or shortest or whatever the correct phrase would be. I'm not. This is an indication of nutritional health. This is an indication of health, an overall indication of health. We're getting shorter because our diet is so bad, and the children are not hungry. This isn't about the kids that Marcus Rashford was forced to help after the government abnegated all responsibility during lockdown. This is about children. This is an overall national average getting shorter because their diets are so poor. And so one of the benefits of having so many people listening now is that we can come at this from millions of different angles. And it would include nutritionists. It would include farmers. Farmers fascinate me. How do you feel about the fact that the people in the country where you farm are now enjoying, for want of a better word, such a poor diet that they're getting measurably shorter compared to people in similar countries, similar economies? It's one of those stories that the more I talk about it, the bigger it gets in my mind. Sometimes we shrink stories while we talk about them. You talk about it, you say, oh no, of course that makes sense. Oh yeah, okay, it's not that big a deal after all. Other stories, when I start trying to explain them to you, my brain goes off like a fire. I go, what? We're getting short. This is supposed to be the 6th richest economy in the world, they keep telling us. They're constantly banging on about growth and all that. And we're actually getting shorter because our diets are so rubbish. I think we're going to go Marvin Gaye on this one. Why? Why is this happening? What's going on? That's what Marvin Gaye means if you're new to the programme. When we go Marvin Gaye on a topic, it means I really just absolve myself of any responsibility to come up with an intelligent treatment of a story, and I just go, hey, here's a thing, what's going on? But sometimes that's the correct way to approach things. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Come at it however you want, all right? Come at it however you want on this, because it's a whopping great marquee and everybody's welcome to come into it. The state of our national diet is so, I want to use a rude word, which doesn't happen very often, especially not when we're not talking about politicians. The state of our national diet is so crummy that our children are falling down an international league table of height. They are getting comparatively shorter as a consequence of the crud that we, often without realising that we're doing them harm, we are feeding them. We are making them comparatively shorter by giving them food that we think is I don't get it. Do you? Talk me through this. How the hell is this happening? What is going on? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's mad, isn't it? The joint forces, the combined forces of capital and propaganda are creating a country in which we can be unwittingly and ignorantly feeding our children so much rubbish that they're getting shorter compared to almost every comparable country, while the country's being encouraged to obsess about a child who thinks she's a cat, allegedly. Or what else are we supposed to be obsessing about? Bloody small boats. Your own children are eating so much rubbish that they're getting measurably shorter compared to their peers all around the world. But you're going to get obsessed about, I don't know, a schoolboy who thinks he's a dinosaur. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Just talk me through how we, in this country, at this time, have ended up in this ridiculous situation. There it is, 90 minutes after 11, 7 centimetres shorter than Dutch children at the age of 5. Because our food, our diet, is so rank. Why? What's happened? Simon's in Liverpool. Simon, what can you tell us?
Hello, James.
Hello.
This last piece really resonates with me at the moment because I'm having. I'll just give you a background. I was a chef in a former life, so I can understand how to produce healthy, nutritious food that's not high in calories.
Yes.
And I did that with my daughter from the time she was born, and then she's gone to university, and in the 3 years that she's been there, she's increased her body weight by around 4 to 5 stone in weight.
Ooh.
And this is all to do, and this is what I'm trying to highlight is the change between home-cooked food,
right,
normal food, natural food produced at home, and stuff that is sold on a street corner from a number of fast food places.
Of course.
Right. Also, I think this is a problem that has been generated, for we have lost our ability to cook. We've lost the ability to produce food at home, cheap, nutritious food at home. Also, on top of that, I'm just back from Amsterdam.
Oh, yeah. Was everyone taller than you?
And you're absolutely quite right, is that I didn't see any obese people in Amsterdam.
Yeah, but you saw loads of fast food outlets, though, and you saw they have mayonnaise on their chips. I mean, you know, it's got to be more complicated than that, hasn't it? There's no shortage. There's no shortage of burger bars in Holland.
Well, it is. There is around the centre, which I didn't go around.
Okay.
But around the outlying areas, no, really, not really. They're all like little delis and what have you.
Okay.
But people are cycling
around. So why here then? So there's a great question. Northern Europeans, we've got quite a lot in common with the Dutch. Why? What has happened here differently from there?
We've lost our ability to cook.
Yeah, but why?
Because the advent of cheap food.
Yeah, but the cheap food could be everywhere. I'm unique to the UK. It can't be a coincidence or an accident, can it? It must be a consequence of things that have happened or been done. So the Dutch are, and they have a lot of dairy in their diet, so that probably explains the tallness in part, the calcium and the bones and stuff like that. Listen to me with my biology GCSE grade B. But why here? When did we lose, and why did we lose the ability?
We lost it because it costs more.
Right.
The very first time when I first started training as a cook, I was actually I worked in school dinners. Now, school dinners have a reputation for being bland and not very tasty, but I can tell you now I'm 57 now, so I started work when I was 16, 17 when I started training. So at that time, it was all fresh food being brought into the school, and it was being prepared as fresh food. And even when I was working there, they were pulling away from that and started bringing in overproduced food.
Because it was cheaper.
Because it was cheaper.
So so this is important. If I'm supplying a school and I'm supplying them with fresh meat and veg, it's gonna. I can make a bigger profit on supplying them with heavily processed, which means lots of stuff has been added to it, like preservatives and salt and sugar. And why is that? Because
maybe not from the standpoint of profit, but from the standpoint of initial outlay. What it's costing them to satisfy their obligation of feeding a child at dinner time.
So it will be cheaper to feed them this than that. Therefore, I'm going to supply that. But here's the bit I don't get. Right? Here is some food that's not processed, and here is some food that is processed. Right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, the processed food should cost more.
Well, theoretically, yes, but if you're mass producing it, then the cost comes down, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I'm gonna stick with this one.
Okay.
All right. So, processing it is a process. I'm not going to win any prizes for that observation.
No.
And a process is a cost.
I mean, you're quite right, James.
So even though I've got 1 million tons of unprocessed food here, to turn it into but I would turn it into 2 million tons of processed food, would I? By the process, adding stuff to it that's cheap and nasty.
Well, almost certainly. So think about it in terms of sausages, the old British banger. I mean, in the war they're called bangers because they put all sorts in it, inclling water, so they would explode.
Sawdust.
So that sort of thing. Yeah. I mean,
I've got a pound of meat, and it's a bit like a drug dealer cutting their cocaine with drain cleaner or I don't know what they use. But that's what it's like, isn't it? So I've got some pure cocaine. But by the time I've cut it, it's going to be worth twice as much as it is now.
I'm probably containing quarter of what you originally started out with.
That's the penny drop moment. That's the penny drop moment. They're cutting food. Processed means cutting in drugs lingo.
I don't just think it's one thing. I also think that we as a nation have lost our ability and will to cook as well. And for me, I mean, obviously, I've got a very personal view on it.
Clearly.
Having from my daughter.
Yeah, be careful, because the other story in the news today is all about eating disorders, which are an absolute
I understand that. And that resonated with me as well. And I'm now thinking to myself, well, has my daughter developed an eating disorder? Because when she lived with me, and I was a single parent. She lived with me from when I was 10 till when she went to university. You couldn't encourage her to overeat. She was overfaced by a lot of food, although she ate healthily and really enjoyed eating healthy food that I cooked, which was very gratifying for me.
Of course.
But literally now she goes to university. She's a university in Liverpool, which is rammed with fast food places.
Yeah.
And this idea that
and it's easy, mate. It's just so easy.
You can get 2 pizzas for the price of 1. So,
And the government has just rowed back from its previous pledge to reduce the buy one, get one free offers that many experts consider really contribute to these sort of problems. Thank you, Simon. I can't believe it's taken me that long to work that out. That's what you need, a proper understanding. So here is I've got a pound of meat. How can that lasagna, that pound of lasagna, possibly cost more than the pound of meat? Because they've processed it and they've added stuff, but the answer is what they're adding to it is considerably cheaper than the meat. So I know some people are listening to this going, "Oh yeah, well done, mate. Better late than a slow clap." But that's how the show works. Sometimes you help me understand stuff, and every now and then I help you. I want to get to the bones of the UK. Why us? Because it's a global world, The food that you can buy in your supermarket isn't different from the food. Well, maybe it is. Maybe I haven't spent enough time in other countries. I know when I go to the supermarket in Greece and France, the balance is different, isn't it? The fresh food balance is different. The aisles of ready meals, maybe it's not quite the same, I don't know. That's why we're talking about it. Anna is in Pontypridd. Anna, what would you like to say?
Hiya. So I've moved from London to South Wales, and I've basically changed how my kids eat, and they're actually a lot worse here. But I found the peer pressure in the mums and what's normal at the schools there to be so drastically different that I'm just going, okay, well, I want you to fit in, so have all the Haribo you want, have all the sweets and the fruit shoots and all
so
the
this is you need. So London mum a bit conscious of health and stuff like that,
and waste and
And now in your corner of South Wales, that is unfashionable.
Yeah. So when I did the first birthday party, I realised, I've completely messed up, and I spent an awful lot more, and I shouldn't have done that because it shows them up. And then when I went to another one, I was like, this is how you do it. And it was basically about 20 years prior. That's what a party used to be like in London. Over here, it's still the same, and so we've sort of gone into a line of, okay, this is what we do now.
You've done if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, kind of, because I just didn't want my kids to be those weird kids where the mum goes, no, you can't have that, you can't have that.
It's a target on their back as well, isn't it? So you go to someone's birthday party and get given a stick of lettuce, a stick of celery when everybody else is being given a crunchy. I mean, that kid's gonna know about it, aren't they? Dear. So why the UK? Do you think? Because here it is within the UK.
I think money and education. I now can't afford to buy organic anymore. I can't afford to do the things that I could do. And also I've seen with the mums here, they're just not educated enough. They just don't realise what they
choose our language carefully, don't we? Because I mean, it's not a question of being condescending. It's a question of It's a question of awareness. It's just a question of awareness.
Yeah,
they're not aware of it. They don't know. And this is the point. This is the crucial point, Anna, that you've made brilliantly. None of these parents are bad parents. Do you remember the mums who were
I have no idea.
Sticking food through the chain link fences when Jamie Oliver was trying to get turkey Twizzlers off the menu? They thought that was an act of love.
Yeah.
And it was an act of love in from their end of the telescope, but they've got no idea. Uneducated, but that's such a loaded word, isn't it? It brings back memories of Brexit. You know, people don't know stuff. What word can you use? You call them ignorant or uneducated, and then lying buffoons like Dominic Raab will accuse you of looking down on people. But that's what it is, you know. And Anna's gone the other way. Well, hang on a minute. Before you go, have you gone completely U-turned on this?
In the home, I was like, right,
crisps for breakfast and stuff like that.
No, in the home they have proper stuff, but outside to everyone else, they're not kids that eat crap, and at home they don't.
No, that's fine. Okay. And there are some of the challenges, some of the problems that you face. 11:30 is the time you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Of course, another reason perhaps is the other side of it. Think about all the bicycle lanes in Amsterdam, as James has just texted me. Think about the bikes. And here, they open one cycle lane and a certain constituency of the country has a fit of the vapours, don't they? I don't know if you've ever been to Holland, but or Denmark, actually. Just off the top of my head, there's the culture of cycling is completely embedded, absolutely endemic, and that must be linked to health, mustn't it? Even if you haven't got a particularly healthy diet, if you're cycling yourself around the town all day and every day, then you're going to be burning calories. Well, it's a question for the ages, isn't it? The policy I just mentioned, the 2-for-1 junk food deals, being delayed by the government for another 2 years. So, you know, you can come up with a positive and a negative analysis of that. You say cost of living crisis, the idea of making food more expensive is obviously ridiculous, but equally you can say, well, they are shown to be incredibly unhelpful initiatives, often ending up being thrown away, and they encourage the overconsumption of really unhealthy food. So what is it about the United Kingdom specifically that has rendered our children now measurably shorter than their counterparts in comparable countries? And we've fallen 30 places. I need to keep repeating this. I'm not necessarily going to put people in idiot's corner for questioning the findings or the statistics, but we've fallen 30 places. So it's not going to be about the size of the breeding pool, as one of my correspondents has just suggested. It is literally down to nutrition by almost all accounts. So what is it about the United Kingdom that has embraced this horror show so enthusiastically? And I think his twin is called Alexander. I got the name wrong. Chris Van Tulliken has written a book about this, and he's been touring the studios, sounding alarms that we would do well to heed. And it was him who I heard him say, our kids are getting shorter. And I thought, don't be daft. And it turns out he's absolutely right. Joe's in Truro. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah, I just wonder if it's at the risk of making myself very unpopular, if it's sort of related to the vegetarianism and veganism. The vegetarianism sort of kicked off in the 1980s.
Do they not have that in Holland?
I don't know, but the Dutch have always eaten a lot of... so the Dutch and the South Sudanese are the tallest in the world, and they both eat huge amounts of milk and yogurt and...
We're behind America, France, Spain, Italy and Germany.
Yeah, so I work a lot in the overseas developing countries, and you can sort of look at the meat eaters, and you can look at some nations or some parts of nations are vegetarians, and some are the cattle keepers. I mean, they're just so much taller and stronger, and I'm sure it's related to the sort of the protein and the calcium and the iron they get, and also if you look at plant-based proteins, they are less. They're not bio. I think the term might be bioavailable.
I think Germany's got the highest percentage of vegetarians and vegans in the modern West, and they're way ahead of us on the average height charts.
Well, it'd be interesting to have a survey of vegans and vegetarians, and
Why?
particularly those that are being. Well, because so if you've been if you've gone vegetarian or vegan at university, by then you've got to your height. But if you're being raised vegetarian or vegan,
yeah, but it's the highest rate is in Germany, and they're measurably taller than us. So it's unlikely. Yeah. It's unlikely to be a reason for the phenomenon that we're examining here. What have you got against vegetarians?
No, I've got nothing against it. No, it's purely.
You sound like an activist, an anti-vegetarian activist. Are you a beef farmer down in Cornwall?
I'm vegetarian for 20 years. Protein is not available in the way it is.
No, well, I'm not going to keep saying Germany's got the highest proportion of vegetarians and vegans in the modern West, and they're much taller than us by. I mean, that's not counting. That's not an opinion. That's counting.
Okay, perhaps I don't know, but it's a scientific fact that protein.
And Italy. Spain, France, America, we're right down at the bottom. And I mean, listen, we're searching for answers. I shouldn't be ungrateful to you for bringing, but I just thought you sounded a little bit anti-vegetarian. I used to be quite anti-vegetarian, Joe. I was a right obnoxious little so-and-so on vegetarianism and veganism, but luckily I saw the error of my ways. The countries with the highest rates of vegetarianism worldwide, I suspect India would be pretty near the top. So Australia comes in 10th. We come in 7th, Germany 6th, Austria, Italy, Israel, and then India comes in top. So I don't know. It seems unlikely. Holly's in Haddenham. Holly, what would you like to say?
Hi, yes. So I am a Dutch-British girl. I'm currently studying in the Netherlands on that Dutch passport that I luckily have.
Yes.
Yes.
No one likes a show off, Holly.
Yes. Well, I am vegetarian. And
Right.
I'd like to say that in the Netherlands
How tall are you?
There's more vegetarian food available in the Netherlands than
Yes.
in
I think Joe was contributing in good faith, but I think her theory was it was a bit crackers.
I'd just like to say that. But
Yes.
I also wanted to say that the diet in the Netherlands, I wouldn't say is too different from in the UK.
Okay.
And possibly the availability of fried food is even more.
That's what I thought from my visits.
Fried food
With mayonnaise.
like in the train station.
With
yes,
mayonnaise
with
on chips. The mayonnaise on the
all
chips.
the
That's
time.
worse than
Really
salt and
sweet
vinegar.
mayonnaise
Yes,
as
I know.
well.
It's unbelievable.
Really
It's
fatty.
delicious.
Yes. And even fried noodles,
Yeah.
deep fried in blocks.
Yes.
Very popular in the Netherlands.
So it's not
so
that
I don't really think it's a matter of fried food, but I think you might be onto something with the bicycle path. I think there's more of an active way of moving in the Netherlands,
What about in the shops?
Also,
What about in the shops as opposed to on the streets? Because we are not an active nation, and for reasons that may be linked to the, we should be able to do whatever we want school of business and journalism. We resist all of these attempts. We call them nanny state, but cycle lanes cause enormous amounts of upset. What about in the shops? What about in the shops? When I go into a supermarket in Holland and you go into a supermarket in Haddenham, do you notice a difference?
yeah, I think there is more, especially I noticed with the bread. All of the bread in the Netherlands, even the fresh, even the stuff in plastic loaves, it's all made in-house. You don't find factory-made bread in the Netherlands, and I think that is a really big part of it. Bread especially has a lot of preservatives in here, whereas in the Netherlands you're more likely to buy brown bread.
You don't see it, do you? You have a bakery aisle that is fresh, and I know we have them in this country, but most people at home have got a packet of bread, not a loaf of bread. And that's got stuff in it like emulsifiers I've been reading about, and it's good because it means that the ingredients don't separate, but it also works in your tummy. The subtitle of Chris Van Tulleken's book, of course, is why we can't stop. Why do we all eat stuff that isn't food, and why can't we stop? That's the crucial point. But why is it peculiar to the United Kingdom? Why? 11:41 is the time. Thank you, Holly. Jane's in Hounslow. Jane, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Nick.
James.
James, sorry.
That's all right.
James. Sorry. I don't often listen to you, but today's very interesting anyway.
Okay, well, this is going really well.
Well, anyway, firstly, I want to say I've got in common with one of your previous callers. It sounded like Jimmy Tarbuck. I can't remember his name. And he was a chef, and he was the same age as me.
Right.
And a lot of what he said I totally agreed with, so I thought I can't just say all the same things as him.
Okay.
But I've got the same kind of grounding and experience as him, working in schools.
Let me nudge you, if I may, towards the UK question. Why the UK in particular suffering from some of the things that Simon and you both recognise? Why would we be more exposed to these habits?
I don't feel the junk food, whatever they call it nowadays, is classed as, say, a treat, or i.e., when I was a kid, we had fish and chips, but that was only once a week. We weren't having it 3 times, 4 times, because, parents probably couldn't afford it.
That's not processed food, is it? That's actually quite... that's just potatoes, fat,
well, it
and
can be the
flour
batter,
and
batter and stuff like that. And it's deep fried, which is no good, as we know.
I don't think
But
so.
that was, we looked forward to that, okay? But there were rules and regulations, so obviously you couldn't demand to have what you wanted. Nowadays, children are addicted to this type of food, you see.
And not in other countries, you think?
Oh, obviously, it came here from America. I remember my
But
first
America's
Big Mac.
America's much taller than us as well. There's something
Maybe,
peculiar to...
I don't know if they all are, but...
Well, no,
all
they're
I
not
know
all
is
taller
in-
than us, but that's what averages are. So the
But they're
average
very-
height of a 5-year-old American is much bigger than a 5-year-old Brit. Thanks, Jane. Take care. Yusuf's in Copenhagen. Wonderful, wonderful Copenhagen. Yusuf, what would you like to say?
Copenhagen. Hi. Morning, James. I love your show. Just been doing a bit of work and had you in my headphones and wanted to touch on the topic. I'm from London. Just over 3 years ago, been in Copenhagen.
Give me the big differences. Give me the key differences.
Oh, it's immense. I could be on here all day, but I've got 2 kids, a 9-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Yeah.
They are my 9-year-old, for example. He went fishing with his school on Monday. Something I've, at my age, still have never done. Haven't had the opportunity to do.
No.
Even in the winter, for example, the kids have the opportunity and, really the emphasis around the education to understand, the different types of food available that are sort of nutritious, but also the support to actually be out there in the different parts in nature. And
did they eat the fish?
Unfortunately, they only caught one.
Okay.
It was a big group.
So they all went hungry that day then? They all went hungry.
They had packed lunch.
But that's not about diet. That's about schooling. And they don't even start school in Denmark in the traditional sense until they're much older. And you've got forest schools and you've got completely different educational system, which bizarrely I know a little bit about. What about the food that's available in shops and on the streets? And is there a measurable difference there?
Massively. The food environment and the accessibility, I think, there are massive disparities. Growing up in London, always had access to a lot of sort of fast food. When I was in sort of Acton High School, for example, I would pop down to my local chicken shop and get a 2 for 2. It was...
And you don't have that in nothing like...
Because 2 chips, right?
Because there's pizza. I've been to Copenhagen. There's pizza places, there's burger places, but there's not... every third shop or 5 in a row. Is that what we're saying?
There's nowhere near that.
Sheer volume.
You have, even in the sort of busy areas.
Why has it happened here then and not happened in other places? Why? Because if the market is there, you'd think that if the demand is there, you'd think the supply would have expanded to meet it.
Well, I think that's a combination of sort of socioeconomic factors, especially over the last few years, but also. I suppose the marketing and advertising. I don't think, as individuals we're protected as much in the UK. We are bombarded.
I think that might be a big part of it. I think that might be a very big part of it. And it cuts both ways. We're not just bombarded with exhortations and encouragements to consume bad stuff, but we are, if you like, insulated from information encouraging us to eat more good stuff. That's what the caller in Pontypridd meant about education. And of course, you start calling for more education in this sort of field, and you get called a do-gooding nanny state virtue signaller or something like that. Or you suggest, well, wouldn't it be great if all the kids rode to school? We'd probably be measurably taller by 5 years from now. When they measure all the 5-year-olds, we'd have probably gone back up these charts again. But no, it's odd. That is it. It is something there. You've been listening to this show for too long. Seriously, if you're sending me messages about full moons, then you've broken the fourth wall. It's like you're in the studio with me. 10 to 12 is the time. Joe's in Huntley in Aberdeenshire. Joe, why us? Why the UK? Why are we so bad at this stuff?
Well, I think it's our lack of regulation of supermarkets.
Yeah.
I've lived in both the Netherlands and in Scotland myself. I came back from the Netherlands on the 17th of March 2020 due to COVID and Brexit and all those horrible things. So lost my job, so I had to come back. And,
while I was living there, it really, really struck me that when I was in the supermarkets, I realised that the alcohol aisles were minimal. Okay. They were completely segregated. So a new parent could not go into a supermarket and buy newborn nappies and a bottle of whiskey. That was impossible to do.
How is it impossible? And then, they're different tills.
Well, because no, the whiskey is not sold in the same shop. So they regulate their supermarkets so that you cannot buy hard liquor.
And that's regulation, that's law, is it? Rather than just, I don't know, supermarket planning.
Well, I don't know that definitively, but that's what appeared because...
Seems likely, doesn't it? Otherwise, it's... they wouldn't do it if they didn't have to. No one ever
exactly.
does.
And you think about when you go into our large supermarkets here, and you think about the square footage of how much we designate to alcohol versus how much we designate to fresh fruit and veg.
How interesting. Never thought of that.
Criminal.
Never thought of that in a million years. I mean, I'm thinking about my local Morrison's, and the booze aisle is... I think there's 1.5 booze aisles. It's absolutely huge, isn't it?
Yeah. And with all the food shortages as well, it really and up here in the north of Scotland, obviously we're at the end of the supply chain. So during this winter, when everyone's kind of going, I can't get a bag of salad. Yeah. We didn't get a bag of salad for weeks. We didn't get it for weeks up here at the end. So I was like, how on earth can I buy a massive multi-pack of crisps easier than I can buy a bag of potatoes?
Well, that's because it's perishable, I suppose, partly. But also the supply chains. That's not going to explain why our children are getting shorter, because that was a consequence of Brexit and lockdown. So So regulation. I mean, this is what the last fella touched on. It's one of my pet subjects, but I knew it was relevant. I wasn't necessarily clear on how big a part I mean, why do we in this country find it so easy to be so unhealthy? Answer, because no one's putting any effort into encouraging us to be healthier, except people who do it essentially off their own back, like Jamie Oliver and Marcus Rashford.
I think as well, with the height difference as well in the Netherlands, they obviously have a huge agricultural history, but...
but it's not. I don't want to get bogged down with the Netherlands. We're shorter than Germany, France, America, Spain and Italy as well. Those are the comparable countries. Are you sort of Northern European or American, comparable climate, geography, economy, and we're considerably shorter than all of them.
If you look at a Scottish demographic, Glaswegians are the shortest of us all. They're also the poorest of us all.
Yeah, that'll be down to nutrition as well, won't it, historically? Some people wondering where's that one gone, whether people graduating from Eton are taller than people graduating from comprehensive schools.
Yep. And I volunteered in a food bank during the lockdowns, and I hadn't quite realised how they function. And they basically get donations from these large food producers of the overproduction of the kind of processed food to give away to people for free, which obviously is very good for food waste.
Yeah.
But what on earth is a food bank supposed to do with a 1-ton pallet of prawn Mary Rose sauce?
Yeah.
And no prawns and no salad to go with it. I mean, what are they supposed to do with that?
That's hang on, just for anyone just tuning in, this isn't Ready, Steady, Cook. This is a rhetorical question to which the answer is God knows. God only knows. No prawns. And also, sorry to interrupt, Joe, don't text me with answers to Joe's question. I do not want to have recipes for a pallet of half a ton of Mary Rose sauce. That's an anomalous example. Food banks do amazing work as well, but they have a problem with perishability as well. So the companies
they get what they're given.
They get what they're given. And if they're offloading processed food, it's almost like a dealer doing tasters.
Yep.
Have a little bit of this and then come back if you want some more. I'll do you a good price.
Thankfully, there's wonderful companies that do support food banks and give them fresh fruit and veg. And there's hundreds of volunteers around the country that are doing food education.
Which is absolutely crucial. But then you hear from Anna down in Pontypridd, and in the absence of food education, you have almost a culture of unhealthiness. Parents who do not know that they are doing harm to their children by feeding them what they are feeding them, because no one tells them. And anyone who tries to gets shouted down by Tufton Street and various right-wing columnists. Funny old world. Thank you, Joe. Stuart's in Basingstoke. Stuart, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James. A long-time listener and great fan of the show.
Oh, thank you.
So I've been reading that same book, that Ultra-Processed People book, and I'm a trained chemist, and I've studied chemistry.
Is there such a thing as an untrained chemist? I suppose the bloke... I've never met an untrained chemist. Yeah? Carry on.
I was always one of those that a long time ago I thought, well, it's always about the food groups, your proteins, your carbs, your fats. And then the more and more I looked into it, the more I kind of started to understand it more. And there's some really key questions around it. But I wanted to get to the point about why in the UK specifically. Yes. And I think you've danced around it, which is, I think it is around our production and our food chain and how it works here and the economics of it. You think everything when you buy in the UK, people want to buy British brand made in Britain. Yet we have the highest manufacturing costs. So, you know, where's the short line going to come? Companies look to put in those margins. How can I make the food last longer? How can I keep the trucks going?
Because we spend less money on food than other countries as well.
Exactly. But then they push these ideas that these things are healthy for us, and then everything that's ultra processed is much more likely to be thrown in your face or advertised. Look at the health benefit of this. You never see broccoli coming with this. Look at this health benefit of having this fresh broccoli. Look at this health benefit of these tomatoes.
You're right. You get a drink, a really heavily processed drink that can help reduce your cholesterol or something like that, don't you? What was the biggest shock? What's the biggest shock you got from the book as a chemist?
The lack of understanding that these companies have when putting these materials in our body. So you talk about our biology is very old, and our body is only able to process. But thousands of years old, thousands of years of evolution, mean that our body looks for certain proteins, carbohydrate structures to break down. We put these complex molecules in our body. It doesn't know what to do with them. You've got a material that wants to hold on to moisture, hold on to fat to give us that yummy texture in the food.
Right.
And then all of a sudden that goes into our stomach. Our body goes, I'm not quite sure how to digest this properly. It can float around. It can store in our body tissue. It can then accumulate fat and water in our body. And then we're wondering why we can't lose weight. We've got these molecules that are designed to hold on to fats stuck in our muscle tissue, in our skin.
And the more of it you eat, the more of a problem you're going to have, and that's why.
Well, here's the pharmacy part that comes in.
Gosh.
They want us to know. They don't want to tell us what the psychological impacts of having these materials in our body are. And you joke about tasters from drug dealers. We've got this highly malleable food that we want to have. It's going to it kicks off those sort of chemical signals in the brain. And my partner, she's a clinical psychologist, and the amount of clinical psychologists needing and wanting to go into sort of food-related conditions. And she's going, it's unbelievable. And we sat down and we went through our cupboards.
You've got to do it in a sentence now because I've got PMQs on the horizon.
Yeah, we were going through our cupboards and going, how much of this food is not real food?
And this is as a consequence of reading Chris Van Tulleken's book, is it?
It's fantastic.
Well, that's where the conversation began, and that's where the conversation is going to end as well. We've got to get him in, haven't we? I think it's fairly clear. Do you know, I'm such a divot. I don't know whether you suffer from this condition, Ben Kentish. You haven't been here very long, so perhaps you haven't developed these bad habits yet. But if I see someone doing loads of media, I sometimes think, forget about it. I want to be special.
I think we all got that tendency, James.
That's the only reason I haven't had. He's been everywhere. PMQ's on the horizon. This could be a good one. This.
It could be a real belter of PMQs this week. So much for Keir Starmer to potentially ask about. Will he talk about inflation? Will he talk about mortgages, James? Yes, almost certainly. Will he talk about the Privileges Committee vote, or in Rishi Sunak's case, the lack of a Privileges Committee vote? Yes, I suspect he will too. The challenge for him is how does he link all that together?
Yes. You got it right last week. Don't jinx it. Don't spoil it.
I'll try not to end my 1 week run, but I suspect he might talk about priorities, James. He might talk about pledges. Rishi Sunak pledged to halve inflation. How is that going? It's barely coming down at all. He pledged to stop the boats. We've seen huge numbers coming across in recent days. He pledged to restore integrity.
Yeah.
How's that going in the wake of this? I think that might be the way for Keir Starmer, just to ask pledge after pledge.
I think you might be right. Can he hit him right over the head with why were you not here on Monday?
Yes. In a word, yes, he can.
And what will he do? Will he give some Swedish Prime Minister gibberish?
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is.
He'll say I had a pre-existing commitment.
Where were you? Professionalism, accountability, and integrity.
That's the question.
Where were you, mate?
That's how he'll phrase it.
Where were you, me old mucker?
And Rishi Sunak will say, I was at a long-standing charity dinner event, which is true.
Yeah.
And I wondered if Rishi Sunak had accepted that invitation at the last minute. I'm told he didn't. It was in the diary for 2 weeks.
But still, I'm sure if he said, I'm a Prime Minister, I've just got to pop out and vote, no one would have objected or asked for their money back.
It was 2 miles away from Parliament Parliament. He left at 9 p.m, James, we understand.
Yeah.
The vote was around 9:30, so
There
he
you go.
could have done
Easily-
both if he
easily have
wanted.
slid in.
Keir Starmer will absolutely want to reference that. Labour MPs think, and some Tories too, actually, think the Prime Minister made a massive strategic mistake.
He looked cowardly. It looked pathetic. It really frightened to go one way and frightened to go the other, which means you end up upsetting everybody potentially.
And that's the concern some Tories had. They thought until this week he'd done quite a good job of marking a change, of drawing lines of distinction between him and his predecessors, particularly on issues like integrity. Dominic Raab lost his job, Nadeem Zahawi was sacked, and so on. They think this was a huge error. They think this was the week when, this is some Tories. Others, I've got to say, look, he was in an impossible situation. I think he did the right thing. But some say he should have just turned up, that Boris Johnson isn't the force that perhaps he was even a few weeks ago. There's nothing to be feared here. Even amongst the party base, he's lost a lot of goodwill and support.
Yeah.
They think there was more to be gained from Rishi Sunak, taking perhaps what was, in some senses, a risky stance, but a stance nonetheless, rather than shying away.
No stance at all. No stance at all.
No stance.
We will, of course, cross live to the House of Commons as soon as Keir Starmer gets to his feet, in case you're new to our coverage of PMQs, and when it is complete, we will pick over the bones of what we have heard. So, I mean, he does sometimes, stylistically, I think he can be at his worst, Starmer, when he's got too much to choose from, because everyone else has got an idea about what he should be doing. But if he doesn't use the Boris Johnson scandal in some way, shape or form, then he would have missed an almighty trick.
He has been known, James, you're right, to frequently miss quite gaping open goals. I think this one is so gaping that he won't. The question is how. It's what we talked about last week. How does he link it to the problems that people are facing outside the Westminster psychodrama in a way that is effective? And he did that quite well last week by talking about all the crises gripping the country while the Tory party, as he put it, were engaged in their own internal divisions. That's the sort of tone, that's the sort of message I think we'll see again today. But I do think he will want to hammer Rishi Sunak on that pledge to restore integrity, accountability, professionalism to government, and how that tallies with not just staying away from the vote, but consistently, indeed afterwards, refusing to say what he even thought about it. His spokesman yesterday was asked repeatedly if he had been able to vote, how would he?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about the Windrush generation who've contributed so much to our country and to the armed forces in this week and all weeks? And Glenda Jackson's passing leaves a space in our cultural and political life that can never be filled. She played many roles with great distinction, passion and commitment. Academy Award-winning actor, campaigning Labour MP and an effective government minister. We will never see talent like hers again. Mr. Speaker, one of the Prime Minister's own MPs says Britain is facing a mortgage catastrophe. Does he agree with her?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I start by joining the honourable gentleman in his tribute to Glenda Jackson? And Mr. Speaker, it's also right that we do support those with the mortgages, and this is why the absolute right economic priority is to halve inflation. Because inflation is what is driving interest rates up. Inflation is what erodes people's savings and pushes up prices and ultimately makes them poorer. Now, this is why, a long time before I had this job, I highlighted the importance of tackling inflation. It's why that I said it is never easy to root out inflation, but we will take the difficult and responsible decisions to do so. It's an approach that the IMF has strongly endorsed in their words, and describing our actions as decisive and responsible.
Mr. Speaker, I realise the Prime Minister spent all week saying he doesn't want to influence anyone or anything. It was certainly keeping to that with his answer. He knows very well the cause of the mortgage catastrophe. 13 years of economic failure and a Tory kamikaze budget which crashed the economy and put mortgages through the roof. So will the Prime Minister tell us how much the Tory mortgage penalty is going to cost the average homeowner?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as ever, the honourable gentleman isn't aware of the global macroeconomic situation. But let me do. But substantively, let me tell him and the House what we are doing to support those with mortgages. We have deliberately and proactively increased the generosity of our support for the mortgage interest scheme. We've also established a new FCA communal duty which will protect people with mortgages, for example, moving them onto interest-only mortgages or lengthening mortgage terms. And we have spent tens of billions of pounds supporting people with the cost of living, particularly the most vulnerable. But that is the difference between us, Mr. Speaker. While he is always focused on the politics, we are actually just getting on and doing the job.
Well, let's test that, because the question he refuses to answer, he actually knows the answer to this question, is £2,900 extra. That's the cost to the average family of the Tory mortgage penalty. Now, he was warned by experts about this as long ago as autumn last year, but he either didn't get it, didn't believe it, or didn't care, because he certainly didn't do anything. And when I raised this a couple of months ago, he had the gall to stand at that dispatch box and say he was delivering for homeowners. How is an extra £2,900 a year on repayment delivering for homeowners?
Well, so, Mr. Speaker, now let's just look at the facts. Let's look at the facts, because he talks about interest rates. Perhaps the honourable gentleman could explain why interest rates are at similar levels in the United States, in Canada, in Australia and New Zealand, why they're at the highest level in Europe that they've been for 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. That's why it's important that we have a plan to reduce inflation. But in contrast, what do we hear from the honourable gentleman? He wants to borrow an extra £28 billion a year. That would make the situation worse. He wants to ban new supplies of energy from the North Sea. That would make the situation worse. And he wants to give in to unions' unaffordable pay demands. That would make the situation worse. Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have many policies, but the few that he does have all have the same thing in common. They're dangerous, inflationary, and working people would pay the price.
Seriously? Sorry? I don't think we need any more, do we? No. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the Prime Minister has a keen interest in the mortgage market in California, but I'm talking about mortgage holders here. And whilst his government is consumed in law-breaking, chaos and division, working people are paying the price. This morning, I spoke to James in Selby. He's a police officer, working hard to keep people safe every day. The Tory mortgage penalty is going to cost him and his family £400 more each and every month. That's nearly £5,000. He told me this morning, they may not want to hear this, he told me this morning that they've decided to sell their house, to downsize, and he's just told his children they're going to have to start sharing bedrooms. Why should James and his family pay the cost of the Prime Minister's failure?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope when the honourable gentleman was talking to James, he explained that his economic policies would make James's situation worse, Mr. Speaker. And it's not just me saying that, Mr. Speaker. The Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies says his policy of never-ending debt and borrowing would damage James because it would increase inflation and drive up interest rates, leaving James and everybody else in this country poorer, Mr. Speaker. The IMF has said that our plan prioritises not what is politically easy, but what is right for the British people. That is what responsible economic leadership looks like, Mr. Speaker.
James and his family will have been listening to that Prime Minister. And their plight should keep them awake at night, because over the next few years, 7.5 million people are going to be in the same boat, all paying the Tory mortgage penalty, month after month after month. The situation is so dire that repossessions are already up 50%, a total betrayal of the idea that if you work hard, you'll get on. So what's the Prime Minister going to do to make sure more families don't lose their homes?
Mr. Speaker, I know he's reading from his prepared script, but he failed to actually listen to the answer that I gave. I did actually spell out in detail what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. We've increased the generosity of support for mortgage interest scheme. We did that proactively in advance. We've also established a new FCA consumer duty that will protect borrowers, for example, by allowing them to extend their mortgage terms or switch to interest-only mortgages. And we have spent tens of billions of pounds supporting households with living costs. Those are the practical steps that we are taking to help James and other families who are facing these situations. But what I would say, because he mentioned mortgage arrears and repossessions, I am pleased to say, Mr. Speaker, they are actually running at a level today that is below when we entered the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, because of the actions that we're taking. But more importantly than that, perhaps, Mr. Speaker, is that they are also running 3 times lower than the level we inherited from the last Labour government.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure from the vantage point of his helicopter, everything might look fine. But that's not the lived experience of those on the ground. After 13 years of economic failure across the country, people are paying the price of uncosted, reckless, damaging decisions by the Tory party. And even now, as mortgages go through the roof, the Prime Minister is planning to wave through honours and peerages for those who cause misery for millions. What does it say about this government that while working people are worrying about mortgage hike, paying the bills, even repossessions, the Tory party is rewarding those guilty of economic vandalism?
Mr. Speaker, no amount of personal attacks and petty point scoring can disguise the fact that the honourable gentleman does not have a plan for this country, Mr. Speaker. He comes here every week to make the same petty points. We are getting on and delivering for this country. Yes, Mr. Speaker, inflation is a challenge. That's why we are on track to keep reducing it. We are reducing waiting lists. We are stopping the boats, all while he is focused on the past, focused on the politics. It's all talk, whereas from this government and from this Prime Minister, we deliver for the country.
Philip, I know you're popular. Come on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituents continue to be concerned about energy prices and energy security. Will the Prime Minister assure me that he will not cave in to the extremist bullies from Just Stop Oil and their patsies on the Labour leadership as well, and instead commit to developing new oil and gas production in the United Kingdom, which will be good for jobs, good for the economy, and make us less dependent on foreign countries for our energy supply?
Well, as ever, my honourable friend makes an excellent point. Putin's weaponisation of energy has amplified the need for greater energy security, and that's why we deliberately have launched new licensing rounds for the North Sea. Official forecasts suggest that a block on North Sea oil and gas investment would mean that the UK's dependence on imports would rise substantially. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party's decision is one that puts ideology ahead of jobs, investment and Britain's energy security.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, in February, the Prime Minister told this here House that borrowing costs are back to where they should be. In March, he boasted we are on track to halve inflation by the end of the year. And in May, he then said economic optimism is increasing. Well, given the dire economic reality of today, is it not now clear that he's taken his honesty lessons from Boris Johnson?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman also failed to mention that not just the Bank of England, not just the OBR, not just the OECD, but also the IMF, all of them have upgraded their growth outlook for the United Kingdom economy this year. Whilst he and others were predicting that this country would enter a recession, the actions of this government have meant that we have so far averted that, and we continue to be on track to keep reducing inflation because that is the right economic priority.
Can I just say, I want people to be a little bit more cautious on what they say. This is the present-serving Prime Minister. The danger will, it could be misled in the way that it was put. Stephen Flynn.
But Mr. Speaker, listening to the Prime Minister's answer, I don't think he quite grasps the reality of the economic situation facing households across these isles. But how could he? But it doesn't need to be like this. It didn't need to be like this. Because mortgage deals in Ireland, they're not sitting in excess of 6%, they're around about 4.5%. Inflation in the euro area, that's not sitting at 8.7%, it's sitting at closer to 6%. Britain is broke. Now, 7 years after their EU referendum, will he finally admit that it was Brexit that broke it?
Mr. Speaker, again, I don't think the honourable gentleman was paying attention earlier. Interest rates in this country are at similar levels to they are in America, in Canada, in Australia and in New Zealand, Mr. Speaker. The rise in inflation and interest rates is a global phenomenon, but that's why early I set out that it was the right economic priority to have to bring inflation down. That's what this government would do. But that requires, Mr. Speaker, that requires difficult and responsible decisions. That's what leadership looks like. I don't think the SNP will ever do the same thing.
Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Wilbur, in my constituency of Anismore, is recognised as the best
incredible.
site
That
for small
PMQs, how many people
reactors.
contribute to it? Starmer, Flynn, Sunak, that funny little fella
Given
from...
the UK government's commitment to nuclear
Where's he from?
and
Scarborough?
Shipley.
My dad's first paper was the Shipley Times, you know.
Did he know Philip Davis?
Highly unlikely. So that's 4 people at least, plus the Speaker, 5 people, and they brought that part of the programme in on time, which I never managed to do. And now I've spoilt it for them, of course, by sticking my oar in at the end. Let me just randomly look at the texts that you have done. Sick and tired of Sunak listing countries with similar inflation rates. None of them are geographically close to us and none of them are in the EU. It seems like a common factor, says Nathan in the Forest of Dean. So Sunak's reply is going to be whataboutism and pointing the finger outside the UK. Oh, James Starmer was so bad. WTF? ? It's a good job the Tories are so bad because Starmer is woeful. OMG, James, he's awful. I so want him to do well, but he's just rubbish at talking. He just got his backside scalped. And for Rishi to say that Labour are putting ideology above jobs and people's lives is pretty rich, coming from criminals who have hijacked our nation since 2010. So it's fair to say not a lot of positivity there for either side of the House, although one really interesting thing that might be worth looking into, if I haven't lost it, which I think I have, that a claim that what he was saying about here is the FCA stuff already exists. In fact, one of my correspondents has given me a reference, which would be MCOB Parap 13.3, where it looks at dealing fairly with customers with a payment shortfall, policies and procedures. I don't know. Ben, we jinxed it.
We did, James. We got it right once, and that was that.
Yeah.
I think.
I meant also on Starmer's performance, having so much ammunition, and then.
Well, we said he couldn't possibly miss an open goal today, and to be totally frank, I thought he missed several. Talking about mortgages is obviously fertile territory for Labour. The idea of a Tory mortgage penalty that Keir Starmer referenced time and time again is something we're going to hear a lot about. Of course, it's politically advantageous to them to point at the fact that people are paying more and more every month on their mortgages as interest rates go up. And on the Sunak answer about interest rates being high across the world, that is true to an extent. But actually, when you look at core inflation figures that we had today, significantly higher than any other country in the G7. It's over 7% here. In France, it's about 4%. Germany, it's under 6%. So there is a case that the UK is doing things worse when it comes to the cost of living than other countries. Keir Starmer could have pointed that out, didn't.
I think just to pause you, one of Jeremy Hunt's advisors has described the domestically driven nature of our inflation, which is something that Sunak, for the reasons Stephen Flynn pointed out, but of course Keir Starmer didn't, will be desperate to avoid. Most roads, or many roads, lead to Brexit on this stuff.
What was curious, James, I thought, is what we were saying before. There were so many options for Keir Starmer to, and you said sometimes that you're right, that's when he struggles most. And rather than linking them all together into a sort of coherent narrative about failure or broken promises or whatever he chose to do, he just asked the same question pretty much 6 times. What is the government going to do to help people struggling with mortgages? Now, Sunak came back and listed a few of the things that the government is doing to help more widely with the cost of living. The truth is, when it comes to mortgages specifically, there's not a lot they are doing. Many in government feel there's not a lot they can do because, of course, if you put money into the economy to help people pay their mortgage bill, they pay their mortgage at the end of the month, you risk driving up inflation even further. So it is a perfect storm for the government. They're really worried. They're really worried about the impact of all this politically. They know people are feeling the pain. They know it's probably going to get worse. And they also feel that actually, in the short term at least, there's nothing they can do about it. So it makes sense for Keir Starmer to try to rub salt into that political wound that is gaping open for the Tories, but doing it 6 times when he could have talked about the Privileges Committee. He could have talked about the inflation figures today.
The best one was the last one. The case study was arguably the most powerful, and he waited until question 3 or 4 to bring James in Selby. I panicked for a bit there when he said, James, I thought, what have I done now? But he that was odd as well. Why would he do that? And Jeremy Corbyn, when he was the future, that was a really effective thing in PMQs. It made Cameron and the Tories look awful when he would stand up and tell a real story about a real person facing real struggle. And the Tories often couldn't really conceal their contempt. So it's a proven track record. It's clearly true, and he brought it in almost as a sort of afterthought.
I suspect what he was trying to do was wait for Rishi Sunak to say it's all fine. This isn't a problem this is a problem everyone else is facing. Here's all the wonderful things we're doing to help, and then say, well, hold on, Prime Minister,
not helping him.
You may say that, but this is the reality. And actually, Sunak's answer to it was a bit wooden. It was a bit robotic. The way you respond to those sorts of heartbreaking case studies, James, is to be very human and say, I appreciate that people are really struggling.
Instead he said, well, don't tell him your plan then, because that really upsets him.
He just turned it back onto Keir Starmer and said, well, you don't have a plan and your plan is dangerous and inflationary. It was a very poor PMQs, I thought, for both leaders, to be honest with you. Rishi Sunak failing to really acknowledge the fact that there is a crisis, that people are really feeling the pinch, and that there will be pressure on the government to do more to help those people, even if it's difficult. But Keir Starmer, at the same time, really, I thought, failing to exploit some of the difficulties that the Prime Minister is in. And once again, it was Stephen Flynn who, in a sense, asked the most effective question, drawing those comparisons with other countries that Rishi Sunak himself had tried to bring into the conversation to say, actually, the UK is in a worse place. Is that because of Brexit? Is Britain broken because of Brexit? And Rishi Sunak again saying interest rates are high the world over. Inflation itself isn't as high the world over. And that's the point that perhaps Stephen Flynn was trying to push the Prime Minister on in a way that Keir Starmer really didn't bother to do.
Yeah, and he's kind of made his bed. Another one here. Keir was a total waste and missed a totally open goal, and Rishi didn't answer anything anyway. What an absolute shambles. Vicky takes a different view. She says, Starmer's being astute on this. It's the lawyer in him. He knows that focusing on mortgages is going to haunt Sunak in the months to come. I mean, you could be right, Vicky, but he could still have done it more effectively. That's the point. He chose one horse, really. I'd have just gone with, why didn't you turn up on Monday? I don't understand. Why didn't you turn up on Monday?
Yeah. You promised integrity. Why didn't you turn up? You promised you'd halve inflation. How's that going? You said you were stopping the boats. Why have we seen hundreds each day? And that's what he could have done. And it's very hard for the Prime Minister to rebut that, because you're jumping issue to issue and linking them with this kind of coherent theme of failure and broken promises. And it's quite difficult for a Prime Minister to rebut that, whereas he was clearly prepared for the mortgage debate. He knew that was going to come up in some capacity. His answers weren't particularly convincing, but I thought Keir Starmer could have given him a far tougher ride and opted for some reason not to do so. That takes us right, James, in a sense that mortgages are going to become, they already are.
He has to make them stick. So what was the phrase? The Tory mortgage penalty.
Yes.
Is that what he's called it?
Yes.
He needs that to stick, doesn't he? He needs everyone who gets a nightmare through their letterbox to think, Tories.
But when you look at polling, he's pushing an open door here, because when you look at the polling and people ask, who do you blame for the fact that your mortgage payments go up? A lot of people already say the government. So, yes, he does need to make sure that politically for him that continues to be the case. But in many cases, it already is. So he can afford to sort of take a few risks elsewhere. Then there's the fact, of course, James, that, yes, while I think it's 2.1 million people are expected to have mortgage increases between now and the next general election, that's still a lot of people who aren't, who are on fixed terms, who have paid off their mortgage, who are renters, who haven't been able to get on the housing ladder. So while mortgages is absolutely key, I think there will also be pressure on Keir Starmer to sort of focus more broadly on the wider cost of living, which he's done in recent weeks. But on the day that inflation failed to fall at all, on the day that suggested the Prime Minister is quite possibly now going to miss the target that experts thought was the most easy one for him to meet of halving inflation. Experts thought
that's a terrible thing to have done. To get it in the neck for making a promise that was impossible to miss, and then to miss it.
Yes.
So that bit's not his fault, but it was the bit that it's going to be missed isn't necessarily his fault. The sense of gravity bringing inflation down. I mean, it's just appallingly bad luck, but he's done it. He's pledged it. Should we run through them? Do you want to just do one by one? So what was it when he made the promise? It was at 10.7.
It was just under 11%.
And it's now 8.7. And he needs it to be down to 5.3
by the end of the year,
or 5.4 by the end of the year.
So he's not on track at all. It would take an economic miracle, frankly, to get it from 8.7 to where it needs to be by the end of the year. And the problem is, James, he's pledged something that's not really in his control.
Well, that was the mad thing about it, because he thought it doesn't matter that it's not in my control, because it's going to come down anyway, and I'll do a lap of honour.
Exactly.
Growing the economy.
Well, it's happening.
Very vague.
Just about.
Yeah, exactly.
0.1%.
So he's not going to jump up and down about 0.1%, but he could claim we have grown the economy. And be unlikely to go in the other way. The national debt.
It's falling a bit, but of course there's pressure on the government to spend a lot more to help people with their mortgages. And actually the cost of borrowing, this is the big issue for the government, is as pressure grows on them to do something to help people with mortgages, the cost of them doing that increases significantly. Gilt's above 5% now, James. The core inflation, the highest level in 31 years. So actually the wriggle room the government has to spend anything more is severely restricted, and they already end up paying billions and billions of pounds a year more on the debt that already exists because of the higher rate of borrowing. So debt that has been falling a bit could well increase quite significantly in the months to come.
And it's up to 100% of GDP now. That was something that the ONS put out this morning. Everyone was obsessing about the inflation figures, but this is the highest level of government debt in more than 60 years, and it is 100% of GDP. So, I would say that is a far from open and shut case on the national debt falling pledge. So probably no on the inflation, barely on the growing the economy. 52.48. That's a very felicitous figure. So on the national debt falling, NHS waiting list.
No, not coming down. Barely coming down at all. Still around 7.2 million.
And stunt the boat.
That hasn't happened at all, despite Rishi Sunak giving a speech last week.
He's already done a lap of honour.
He had. Since then, I think it's been about an average of between 300 and 400 a day over the start of this week. So significant numbers coming over, and no sign at all of a longer-term reduction in the number of people coming here on small boats across the channel. So why Keir Starmer didn't do that, James, I just don't know.
Well, he could do it any time, I guess. Maybe a wait till we're a little bit closer to Judgment Day on those 5 pledges. I have noticed, oddly, on the boat stuff, that the client media has taken its foot off the gas on that, which makes life a lot easier for Rishi Sunak and makes Suella Braverman's purpose even harder to discern than it usually is. But so the Telegraph in particular seems to be obsessed about children who pretend that they're cats or something. So the culture war element of the small boat seems to have moved, which may be...
It has a bit. The salience has slightly dropped, but it's still one of his 5 promises. It's still something that voters will remember that he put a lot of focus on. Do you remember he said after inflation, it's my biggest priority. It's the thing that I'm spending most time on. People won't forget that. And people will, the worry I think that Tory MPs, particularly in Red Wall, have is that people will feel a real sense of betrayal, particularly on that if they were promised something so clear and so tangible and it so clearly doesn't happen and isn't delivered. It's a big, big risk for the Prime Minister.
Which could be changed by the media not throwing red meat to those people, and therefore, as the figures show us, their concern diminishes accordingly. Yeah. It's a fascinating time. So missed opportunities this week is the headline.
It was just a poor display all round. I think Rishi Sunak didn't come out particularly well. Keir Starmer didn't come out of it very well. Stephen Flynn once again gets man of the match, I think.
Right, the first question was slapped down fairly effectively, wasn't it? I think Flynn's first question. I've forgotten now what it was, but I just remember thinking at the time, we didn't see that coming. I can't.
About Britain being broken.
Maybe, yeah. I can't remember. Anyway, 12:31 is the time. Ben Kentish, always splendid. Thank you very much indeed. I love the word peculiar. It's gone a bit Partridge, hasn't it? Sorry. But I love, not in the peculiar as in funny ha-ha or funny peculiar, but I love the word when you use it to say peculiar to. When you say that habit is peculiar to Capricorns, you might say. So what I'm interested in now, we're just going to return to it briefly, and then Dom Jolly is joining us at 12:45. He's just back from Ukraine, where he has been doing the Lord's work with Save the Children. I peculiar to the UK, talking about the food stuff, why we're shrinking. 5-year-olds in this country are measurably shorter than 5-year-olds in comparable countries, and we have fallen 30 places in the World League table. I get some texts that are very flatteringly long. And by flattering, I mean I am flattered by the amount of effort and energy you've put in to communicating with me. But obviously, I can't read them all out, and I sometimes feel bad about that. But I made a note of this one because I knew we'd have a few minutes to return to the topic before Dom joins us. And this is just really good. I was going to make a list, but I think you've done it for us. I'm a retired group technical director for a multinational food and drink company. There are a number of points that answer your question about child height. Number one, 2007 banks crash, Tory austerity changed the UK marketplace, pressure on companies to cut costs and maintain profits. Protein makes kids taller, but is more expensive than carbohydrates, fat and sugar. So you'd see a change in constitution of processed food post-crash that explains in part some of the stuff that we see going on here. Number two, and this is something that I think most of us need educating about, mouthfeel and the so-called bliss point optimal combination of fat, sugar and salt. This causes maximum brain stimulation from eating and is the key driver for formulation to boost sales. And those bog-off deals that the government has just backed down on for another 2 years, they're mixed with cheap carbohydrates and water. So you're generating sales cheaply and always creating an appetite for more and more. You're chasing that weird sense, very brief sense of satisfaction. And number three, the processed meals. Process means you've heat treated or mechanically broken down complex food molecules more than home cooked or raw food, which means faster digestion. That's fascinating. And it means you still want to be eating before your body tells you that you're full. All of this makes a lot of sense to me and fits with the sort of facts as we have them. And that drives overeating, because you're carrying on eating even if you've eaten enough. And then it ends with a bit of personal information. It's from Ian in West Kirby. Brilliant text, this, Ian. Thank you so much. It says, my dad was one of 10 siblings born in 1926. They survived on bread and dripping, which is limited protein, and all 6 brothers were only 5'6". All the brothers have sons that are over 6'1". This is due to free school milk, on-site cooked school dinners in the 60s and 70s, and a better economic climate. That's why they existed. That's why they did free school dinners, just to improve the health of the nation. Now you'd have some vampire from Tufton Street turning up and saying, "Oh, it's ridiculous." You'd have Tories voting against it, as they did. And Ian's conclusion, which you could probably work out for yourself, is that an awful lot of what we're talking about is austerity and profit before health, or rather, I should phrase that slightly differently: austerity and profit before health. That's pretty irresistible. So I don't know that I need to make a list. 12:37 is the time. Catherine is in Leiden, in the Netherlands. Catherine, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, James. Hi. I've been living in the Netherlands since September, and I actually think one of the biggest differences is actually urban planning.
Yes.
Not necessarily nutrition, because as you said, a lot of the junk food which is available in the UK, you have here in the Netherlands anyway. However, I think when I look at the lifestyle I live in the UK, my parents live, and also my lifestyle my friends have, is that when they do their food shopping, they do it once a week at an out-of-town shopping centre. And because it's out of town, they have to take their car with them in order to get there.
Yes.
And with a car, you have a boot, which is a big amount of space where you can put your food in. And because you have a boot, you buy stuff that you don't necessarily need for that week.
Yes.
So think of like junk food and crisps like that. Whereas in the Netherlands, you know, your supermarkets are usually either a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute bike away.
Right.
Because of that, because you can only carry what you need, you don't tend to buy as many junk food.
And you don't buy I always remember the first time I went to America and I wanted to have a bag of crisps for my lunch, with my lunch, and I couldn't find one. I could only find sacks of crisps, skips of crisps, not skips of skips. I don't have skips in America, but huge sacks of crisps. I couldn't find a normal, Gary Lineker-sized packet of crisps. Would that be true in rural Netherlands, though?
Yeah, so my boyfriend is Dutch, and he actually lives in a small village.
Okay.
And they have 2 shops about a 5-minute bike ride away.
So we've gone that thing then. It's the corporate side of things. So The experience in the shop is different as well, though. So although we focused on the fact that there will be lots of junk food outlets and you can buy chips with mayonnaise on them and things like that, there's not going to be 6 of them in a row in the Netherlands. And when you go into the shops, you're not going to be offered nearly as much processed food as you are in a British supermarket. And you're going to be doing your shopping on a much more grazing type premise. You're going to buy what you need for that day or that night or tomorrow or the next couple of days.
Exactly.
You're not going to be buying in huge amounts of food that lasts for ages. Snacks and treats is not the right word, but for ages. And then all of this adds up and contributes. Did you notice it before today? When I said, I don't mean did you notice people are taller? That's a silly question. But did you notice
definitely
measurable nutritional differences or measurable lifestyle differences between Leiden and London?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's definitely measurable lifestyle difference. Another big one is that it's common for children to actually go home for lunch.
Right.
So instead of eating food that they're given at school, which, as we know, in the UK, it's not great. We saw the work that Jamie Oliver did to make it better. In the Netherlands, kids actually go home, so they cycle home and they cycle back. And I, from what I've seen, I think kids get a better diet when they are at home in comparison to when they're at school. And I think that also feeds into it. And then going back to urban planning, that is because kids can just cycle home from school. They don't have to stay at school and get, whatever they're given. They can go home and they can have, a bigger availability.
And when we have anyone trying to sort of improve that infrastructure or open up cycle lanes, they get absolutely pilloried or attacked, arguably by the same forces responsible for creating the scenarios that we've been talking about. That's why I am so intrigued by these so-called think tanks and their infiltration of the media. Because if they don't tell you who pays their wages, how unlikely is it that they are being subsidised and funded by precisely the sort of people who don't want healthier children, because healthier children means less profit. And as Julie reminds us, you've already got a very weird right-wing hysteria growing up around so-called 15-minute cities, which encourage more cycling and walking. The idea is that you'll be able to get everything you need within 15 minutes of your front door, so you don't need to get in your car and drive away. But some of the strangest contributors to public discourse have got their pants in a bunch about that as well these days. It's a search, isn't it, post-COVID? The sort of COVID hoaxsters, the vaccine liars and all that kind of thing. They're desperately searching around for new things to frighten their followers with. Otherwise, the grift comes shuddering to an embarrassing halt. Thank you, Catherine. It is 12:42, and Jenny is in Manchester. Jenny, why the UK? Why are we so... I've got a lot of answers, but there's always room for more.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to speak to you, by the way, and
Likewise.
thanks for everything that you do.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that's okay. I too am a really big fan of Chris's book, Chris Van Tullochen, and I thought that Ian's text kind of summed all that up really, really well. But in particular, in the last caller was really interesting because she almost touched on what I'm going to be talking about, which is that I think our attitude to food, it's really obvious how little emphasis we place on the value of sitting down and enjoying a good meal. I think at school, I've noticed my kids often come home complaining that they've been rushed to eat to make room for the next lot of kids who are about to come into the dining room. It's rush it down, bolt it down, get back to work. And I think the same's true of adults as well. And I think it really doesn't help. I found that at one point I was working in France and that the attitude to the food break there was so different. I couldn't believe that everyone had to sit down for a full hour to eat their food, and it was when the last person stood up to leave, that's when the lunch break ended.
I think Fred Sirieix talked to us about this on Full Disclosure, about being at home with his parents, and it is a meal is a meal. It's not a fuel stop. It's not like a fuel stop in a Formula One race. It's a meal. It's a moment. It's an end in itself.
That's it. And I think that's the reason why, it's huge. There's so many reasons. The food environment is not one thing. But I think part of it is the fact that we're not sitting down, we're not appreciating it. And the sort of food that you can bolt down fast, that you can microwave, let's microwave it to make it even quicker so I can get back to work.
Yeah, but other countries have a better work-life balance then, probably. Yeah. I mean, some do, some don't. But
some do, some don't, of course.
Northern European countries, you just feel that maybe we're putting in more hours, snatching meals in different places. The cities and towns are set up in different ways. And no one's really pushing back, are they?
No.
I mean, literally
That's what it feels
nobody.
like.
Yeah, it's quite bizarre. Jenny, thank you. I nearly said there's so much to chew on there, but even by my standards, that would have been an unforgivable pun. So I'm very glad I didn't say that out loud. 12:45 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Apologies to Monique and to Daniel, Taz, Linda, Sal. Oh, look at that. Glasgow, Belfast, Nottingham. Got all we had Pontypridd earlier. I think every show we should have somebody from each of the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. Otherwise, I'd feel that I'd let them down, I'd let you down, but most of all, I'd let myself down. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I like Wednesday afternoons, if we get it right, post-PMQs, a little bit of phoning, and then ideally a jolly old guest. And I've got a very jolly and old guest with us.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Watch and learn, Dom Jolly. Watch and learn. But you're not here for obvious reasons. I think you will return in a couple of months when your new book about conspiracy theories is out.
I'd love to chat to you about that.
We will do. And you, of course, have been on Full Disclosure. So some people listening to this will be aware of the slightly surprising qualifications you have for being a Save the Children ambassador, i.e. you grew up in a war zone, effectively, during Lebanon's civil war, the family business based in Beirut. But you're just back from Ukraine.
I literally 2 days ago, yeah.
How did you get involved in the first place in Save the Children in general and that sort of visit in particular?
Well, I'm like a lot of people who, when I was tweeting I was in Ukraine, it's what on earth are you doing there? Clown in a war zone and stuff. But and I do have a sort of healthy wariness, I think, of celebs and charities and stuff. But the reason I first got involved was Save the Children were doing a lot of work for Syrian refugees when the Syrian civil war really kicked off. And as someone that grew up in Lebanon and visited Syria a lot, I thought, actually, that's an area I know a lot about. Right. And a lot of refugees were coming into Syria, into Lebanon. And they approached me and asked if I'd visit a refugee camp in Jordan, which I did. And I just thought, well, this is something I know about. And then following on from that, I started working with them, and they sent me to the Ukraine in 2018. Not the Ukraine, I've got to be so political about it, Ukraine.
Yes.
And to the Donbass area, which at that time was a forgotten war. It was like 100 miles of First World War trench warfare going on, 3 hours flight from London. And I couldn't believe it. I had no idea. And I was doing a film about kids that were having to cross the front line every day. Anyway, we went down to Mariupol, and I found Ukraine astonishing, and I found a lot of similarities in just the sort of feeling as there was in Lebanon. The civil war is a very odd thing, although whether Ukraine's a civil war is a slightly tricky issue. But yeah,
sure.
And so when they asked me to go this time, I thought, well, I've got to really. And I genuinely, it is something that I think when I grew up, I've now realised that I possibly did have some sort of PTSD. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but we were shelled a lot. We'd sit in the basement at home. We were at school and shells would land. And then I'd come to school here and I'd be it was a very sort of schizophrenic life.
Yes.
So I think probably I did have
hypervigilance is the phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean,
you're in a state of constant alert.
But it's actually something you and I have sort of talked about, because actually you get the same thing in boarding schools.
Yeah.
It's
mad though that sounds. Yeah, it's true.
It's the fight.
You could get hit at any moment.
It's fight or flight.
Yeah,
and actually, it was one of the things in Ukraine this time that was so weird, and it took me right back to when I was a kid. Is that it's so odd going to Ukraine, because we're in Odessa, we're in Mykolaiv. Mykolaiev's 30 miles behind the current front line.
Wow.
And I could drop you in either of those places and blindfolded. And a lot of the time you'd think, where am I? I don't know. I'm in the middle of Europe. It's a completely normal place. And then suddenly the air raid sirens go off and everything changes. And it is a sort of constant... I mean, I was only there 4 days and I found it incredibly stressful. We had missile attacks or alerts every night. So we were in the bunker, out of the bunker, and you don't get much sleep. And statistically, the chance of getting hit is probably low, but it's just a nagging, constant thing. But for that to then extend over a year and a half for kids who've got no schooling now, a lot of them get educated, they spend a lot of time underground, they're all educated online, they're all split up, so they've got no social contacts and stuff. It was extraordinary.
We'd learned today about the psychological impact of lockdowns on British school children. So, imagine that plus bombs.
The extraordinary thing about it, I realised, is, a lot of Ukrainians, I said kids are being taught online, but that's not a new thing for them.
Sure.
They'd literally just come out of COVID having done that. So it's been 4 years.
You spend time with teachers and parents,
yeah.
and obviously children.
Yeah.
I mean, what the chief purpose of the trip is to raise awareness, to remind everybody back here about what's going on there.
Well, I think, there has to be a certain level of Ukraine fatigue because it's gone on for so long. But also, as someone that is an ambassador for Save the Children, I want to know what it is they're doing out there and where your money's going. And the best way is to go and get there on the ground. So I did 3 things. I went to a village that was on the front line till about 3 months ago, and then the front line moved. And so we went out there and we met a family who'd left the day before their house was destroyed by a bomb. They were then dispersed. They've now come back, but their house is completely destroyed. So they're living with relatives. And so they got given a cash grant by Save the Children, which allowed them just to at least buy some basics because they both lost their jobs.
Okay.
The school next door was completely wiped out, so the kids weren't at school. So we went to see some teachers learning to teach kids online. And then I followed a mobile digital learning centre. So 2 times a week, they go to villages where schools are not. Because if a school doesn't have a bunker or a window's broken, it's not allowed to be open.
Right.
And so these guys turn up in a village, all the kids come, they give them basic lessons. But to be honest, it's really about getting the kids to come back together and have a social life and play, because that's what they're
wanting
lacking
to do
normal lives
with no outlet.
Yeah.
How conscious are ordinary citizens of Ukraine of the ebb and flow of the war? I know that Zelensky has been speaking remotely to a meeting in London today designed to shore up support, economic and commercial support for Ukraine, but talking about the counter-offensive possibly being slower than desired. How invested are they in that, or are they just... Because what I'm struck by, Dom, is the juxtaposition of the ordinary and the utterly extraordinary.
Which is exactly what it is. And, we were talking about conspiracies a little earlier. One of the really worrying things, I took a picture of, we were sitting in a place in Odessa, beautiful tree-lined street, and we were having lunch, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, really? So there's not a war on? Like, how can you have a war? And you're like, have you heard of the Blitz spirit? I mean, there's part of the human condition is that people have to exist and have to have a normal life.
Yes.
But I think the feeling in Ukraine is, the difference is one side obviously is resisting. I mean, I can't really talk politically because I'm
of course.
Representing Save. But I think there's definitely a feeling that the big moments of the war are over. There's not going to be massive swathes. It's sort of a First World War
attrition.
Back
to those trenches that you saw in Donbass.
We're going to take 100. We're going to take a kilometre and then lose a kilometre. And it doesn't seem to have a particular end game. I can't see what it is.
And I don't want to sound glib, but there must be moments of, if not magic, then restoration of faith in human nature, particularly when you're dealing with children.
I mean, there were so many. I mean, from weird moments, like war has become high tech. I didn't realise. So before I went to Ukraine, I had to download an app called Air Alert Ukraine.
Okay.
You put in where you're going, and then every time, it's very creepy. Suddenly your phone flashes and it says, get to the shelter now. And then you get a very spooky text saying, strategic bombers detected taking off in the Caspian Sea, or missiles. I mean, it's very paranoid. Then the air raid sirens go, which are visceral as anything.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is that there's this heightened sense of what the important things are in life, and the people you meet they just get on with it. And there's a bonding, which is very interesting. There's a real black humour, which is incredible. But yeah, the kids were the most extraordinary ones I met. I mean, the great things for me, the thing that really brought it home, we met this woman from Mariupol who'd left Mariupol, had come all the way up to Lviv. On our way out, we stopped at Lviv, which is the westernmost, probably the safest town. So a lot of people go to Lviv. And she was really desperate to come and see us, and we didn't know why. And she got to us just as we were leaving, filming at a place, and then she just broke down in tears, and she couldn't speak. And we were like, have we done something wrong or whatever? And she genuinely just wanted to say thank you. And she wanted to say thank you to Britain for the support.
Gosh.
I didn't really want to see myself as a representative of
You're
Britain.
welcome.
Yeah, I said thank you very much. That. But then also she had been a recipient of an immediate cash grant from Save the Children when she arrived. When these people arrive with a disabled kid, they've got nothing at all. And so sometimes you can get help, but that takes 3-4 months.
Gosh.
So it really made me realise, okay, you're doing some good here. So but Save.
How can people find out more about the work in general or the trip in particular? And
well, if they
contribute.
If they go to savechildren.co.uk, .uk.org. There's everything on there, and I've made a film. I made a couple of films actually, and that will be coming out and stuff. But no, it's incredible.
And you see, I mean, this is the point. You're on the ground. You see the parts that the money is reaching, as opposed to reading it on a spreadsheet. Or
I totally agree. And again, whatever your political viewpoint or your geopolitical viewpoint, the one thing we can't argue about is kids. It's like, kids have no choice to be there. They're totally innocent. They'd have, and they need help because, that is a childhood completely. That's going to have so many ramifications later on.
Dom, it's great to see you, always.
Thank you very much. Can I just say, I've listened, this is the soundtrack to my life, LBC. I've been listening to it since, I think, about 1984. When
you
it
are
was
a proper anorak,
in Gough Square.
Yes,
so, yeah.
no, you're absolutely right.
So it's very odd to be in here, but thank you very much.
Well, I, perhaps to that end, I've had a lot of messages while you've been here from Greg and James and John. And Sandra, all asking about a regular caller to LBC called Humphrey.
I would have no idea what that is.
We don't know anything about.
We don't know anything about that.
No,
no,
nothing.
Okay, no.
Don Jolly, always
sounds
a
like
pleasure.
A terrible person.
No, you are listening to. You have been listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you've missed any of today's show, remember you can catch up on Global Player, 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 catch